Re-Zero, Starting Life in Another World by Teppei Nagatsuki, casted six-tale novel. Please subscribe to our channel. The whisper of love echoed. It sweetly, gently echoed against his eardrums, his brain, his heart, his soul.
I love you.
The whisper of love was muffled. Did it come from a man or a woman? Even this was left vague. But beyond any doubt, this whisper of love was directed at Subaru Natsuki and he alone. A black wriggling shadow spoke to him softly. It took the shape of a person, clad in a dress the color of darkness, with long, raven-black hair. The shadow stared at him with an inky sable face. Everything composing the shadow ensnared Subaru's mind and body, smothering him in sweetness.
I love you.
His thought process had ground to a halt. Subaru had even forgotten how to breathe. All he could manage was to simply gaze forward, unable to make the slightest move. A dense miasma made his skin prickle as the terrible spectacle of the sanctuary sank into shadow. Like a small animal encountering a menace so overpowering that it struggled to breathe, Subaru was trapped in a world that had lost its vitality, ripped out by its very roots.
Subaru knew this place. He had tasted its agony and despair over and over again. This was the world that always appeared whenever he broke the taboo, a place where time stopped, and the witch.
I love you. I love you.
As Subaru was frozen in silence, the shadow slowly extended a finger toward his cheek. He couldn't avoid it. The issue wasn't the shadow holding him down or anything like that. His inability to move was because Subaru's own flesh and blood would not permit it. Subaru's soul refused to offer any resistance against the shadow. Accordingly, the shadow touched Subaru as it pleased.
I love you. I love you. I love you.
Subaru couldn't sense any malice from the shadow. There was no animosity. But this wasn't because it was indifferent towards Subaru. Indeed, quite the opposite. The shadow inundated Subaru with an overwhelming level of adoration that bordered on madness. It was blind, almost stubborn devotion. Enough to make a person ask, why go to such lengths? Why go to such lengths? Subaru felt like he was being blotted out by the inescapably crazed passion. In that moment, the shadow had no interest in anything besides Subaru.
I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you.
The whispers of adoration swirled around inside Subaru's skull like they were caught in a vortex. Love stirred his eardrums. Love drenched his brain. As love filled his consciousness to the brim, love was also boiling his soul until it fell to pieces. It was an assault by love, a slaughter by love, a violation by love.
I love you. 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 I love you.
Love controlled Subaru. Love had enslaved Subaru. Love was robbing Subaru of every drop of love he had.
Hey, stop screwing around!
Suddenly, an unspeakably destructive force wedged itself between Subaru and the shadow's loving embrace. The impact sent Subaru flying directly backward.
Wah!
Tumbling across the hard ground after landing, Subaru finally came to a halt when he slammed into an old graveyard wall. Once he gave his head a good shake and looked up, he noticed his mind had been freed from the supernatural fever that had gripped him only moments earlier. Now that the static in his thoughts had cleared, he forced his eyes open to see what was happening. Then,
This is seriously the worst-case scenario. Hey, can you move, damn it?
there was a voice. Subaru spotted golden hair and a short person backing away from the shadow. Subaru recognized that abrasive tone and overflowing readiness to leap into battle. He remembered the sight of the peculiar stance that kept the body low to the ground and those bared fangs. The realization that he knew this person shook Subaru to his core. Even in his wildest dreams, he never would have guessed who would come to shield him from peril.
Garfield, why are you? You serious in this situation? Don't make me laugh. Definitely not my first choice. But no way I ain't picking you up.
Garfield reacted to Subaru's shock with annoyance. Still wary of the shadow before him, he grabbed Subaru's collar even though the boy was still in a heap on the ground.
Wee, you're jumping. Might break your neck, but just grin. Bear it? That really isn't something you can just grin and bid, but...
Before Subaru could finish his quip, Garfield tensed his knees and launched upward, drawing a gua of agony out of Subaru as they escaped into the air. And a moment later, the shadow on the ground swelled up and exploded. Rapidly gaining mass, the black shadow billowed into a wave that chased the flying pair, threatening to smash them flat. The black wave engulfed everything nearby, scattering destruction over a wide area with dreadful force and scale. The cascade was so fierce that the forest, the houses, and even the witch's tomb were indiscriminately swallowed whole.
Don't go biting your tongue now.
Subaru could only gape at the apocalyptic spectacle, but Garfield didn't falter. Obeying his instincts, Garfield continued bounding ahead in search of a foothold where they might find refuge from the wave. As the encroaching darkness cracked open the muddy ground and knocked over one tree after another, they leaped and leaped and leaped.
Smoo! Samoon! Ha!
As the black wave mowed down the forest, tearing up the very earth and blotting out the ground wherever it passed, everything Subaru could see was churned up and consumed by the shadow as it seemed to grow large enough to envelop the entire world. That was when Garfield finally arrived at their destination. There was a lone stonework house left standing at the edge of the settlement in the sanctuary. The moment he touched down onto its roof, Garfield tossed Subaru some distance away while continuing to draw ragged breaths.
Oh, damn it all. That bastard. Thanks for saving me. The hell? You sure don't seem like the type who would say thanks. Ya got a problem, or something, huh?
Garfield bared his fangs at Subaru, who was crawling along the roof. Looking up at the ferocious darkness forming overhead, Subaru grimaced. The discomfort he felt was showing on his face as well.
I ain't complaining, it's just I didn't think you'd save me, so... Ha! Treating me like I got no heart or something. The Rose Knights of Talios have no need for cradles, you know? If you don't like it, go ahead and jump right into that thing's bosom. Sorry, I've already settled on a favorite bosom, so I'll pass. Sighing at Garfield's jab, I gently placed a hand on my chest. Besides the incomprehensible situation, there was another reason that made my heart leap. Getting saved by Garfield was a shocking development. After all, Garfield was supposed to be my greatest foe within the sanctuary. The last time around, after rejecting my declaration that I would challenge the trial, he was the one had who incarcerated me before training Fang and Claw on Ram, Otto, and the people of Earlham Village who had helped me try to escape. I hadn't forgotten the anger I felt. It had been unforgivable. This was my mortal enemy who I needed to defeat. That was why I had no idea why Garfield was doing his best to save me. Garfield, don't you! Don't make me repeat myself. Can't you see the situation we're in? Who gives a damn about our differences? Right now, what's important is figuring out how to tear out that thing's neck. Nothing else matters.
When Subaru pressed the point, Garfield brushed his idle concern aside with a quiet comment. His tone had been calm, but that's exactly what instilled Subaru with the greatest fear he had felt that day. It was then that he belatedly realized the fire blazing in Garfield's jade eyes. Rage, indignation, fury. The intensity in those eyes immediately brought those words to mind. As Garfield nursed those emotions, Subaru finally found the words to ask the question he ought to have brought up earlier.
Garfield, what happened to Ram and the others?
By the time I came out of the tomb, the surface of the whole area had been swallowed up already. You're here in perfect shape, but where's everyone else?
They're inside the shadow.
After Subaru raised his fears, hoping they would be laid to rest, the only thing that came back to him was a cruel reply. As Subaru's breath caught in his throat, Garfield made a growl of remorse and said,
It came out of nowhere. By the time I noticed what was happening, everything was already covered by the darkness. As for me, if Ram hadn't sent me flying with her wind, I probably would have gotten caught up in it too. You mean Ram just got caught by that thing? Ryuzu and Otto too? Yeah, that's right.
The old hag, the noisy dude, everyone.
And Amelia?
Garfield offered no reply for the trembling Subaru. That was all the answer he needed. Below where they stood, the ominously undulating shadow continued its encroachment upon the sanctuary. Stunned to see the treetops of the forest steadily sinking, Subaru forgot to breathe. Everything was being engulfed by the pitch-black body. What happened to everything that was swallowed by that darkness? The hope that the people inside were only unconscious was dashed the moment he took a good hard look. Subaru could only imagine that the chances of finding survivors inside the shadow were despairingly bad.
What the hell's going on? How could at a time like this? The Bowel Hunter, the Beastmaster, the Great Rabbit, and Garfield. I had come flying out of the tomb ready to defy any disaster that threatened to befall me. After obtaining Echidna's cooperation, I had hardened my resolve to face and overcome any obstacle that stood in my way. Naturally, I had decided all that completely unaware of the incomprehensible entity before me now. Why here? Why now?
Subaru glared at the center of the swirling shadow that was devoid of rhyme or reason. He screamed with everything he had.
Tell me why the hell you're here. Witch of Jealousy.
His ears had heard the name over and over. He'd felt the being's existence countless times before. The stories handed down for generations named her as the worst of all calamities. She was the one responsible for Subaru's suffering. She was the root of all evil, the shadow that had engulfed Amelia, and the others was none other than the Witch of Jealousy.
Think. If I don't do something, figure something out, and defeat it somehow.
Pounding his dull-feeling head, Subaru desperately searched for a path to victory. He had to drive back the shadow and retake the sanctuary, now enveloped by darkness.
What for? You have already lost Amelia and the others in this world.
Subaru, slammed by the internal thought, made a slight sound in his throat. In contrast to Subaru's roiling emotions, his inner voice had delivered an exceptionally cold-blooded judgment. It was mocking him for stubbornly clinging to a doomed world that had already gone past the point of no return and demanding that he take logical, decisive action.
What would we do even if we did manage to overcome this? There's no way to go on, not in a world like this.
Bastard! Trying to say there's no point in coming after me?
Whoa.
With one murmur from Garfield, Subaru's deep, introspective thoughts vanished. Not bothering with the young boy right beside him, Garfield turned his sharp, jade-colored eyes toward the shadow.
Scratch that! This bastard isn't even looking this way. After doing all this, now you head outside and ignore me, huh?
Garfield roared, practically spitting blood at the humiliation, but the shadow paid him no mind. Like he had said, it was already attempting to leave the sanctuary, exiting the forest. After displaying such obsession earlier, the shadow suddenly wasn't even acknowledging Subaru's existence as it proceeded out of the sanctuary. Unable to discern what the true intent might be, Subaru was left confused. Then he shuddered, as if struck by a thunderbolt. A sudden flash of inspiration came to him without a single factual basis. And yet, he knew there could be no mistake. He could declare with absolute certainty that
To the mansion.
Ah?
The mansion. That witch. She's trying to head for Rosewall's mansion. The memory of the witch's whispers of love, as well as how that it had intruded upon my thoughts, even as it violated my mind and soul, all came roaring back. The goal hadn't been to love me. The purpose was to dive deep inside of me in search of everything that I cared about, to understand those things. The ultimate goal was to rob the world of everything I might turn my love toward, monopolizing my affections. As if I'd let you do whatever you want. We've got to stop her. Stop her how? Asked the cold, whispering inner voice, but he stubbornly flung it aside. Stop her how? Figure out a plan. Then just stop her, obviously. He had to find a way to strike down that witch. It wasn't pointless. There had to be some meaning in trying to stop her. Garfield, can't you attack her? Slow her down somehow?
Now the idiot asks, stop running your damned mouth. Me, I've been slamming every attack I could think of into that thing for ages. Nothing gets through that shadow dress. Doesn't even leave a scratch.
If Garfield can't,
Even what seemed like a surprise attack hadn't inflicted any damage to the witch. If even Garfield's mighty blows had no effect, it was very possible that the shadow dress nullified physical attacks. If that was the case, only magic would work. And the top contender for that was
I'll tell you right now, there ain't a single reason to look for that damn Roswell. The only ones left in this forest are me, that legendary lady witch.
even Roswell? You're sure?
The old hag's house and the cathedral are both gone, down to the last brick. Can't rely on the loon. It's just us.
Even if he was far from full health, Roswell was unmistakably a powerful man. Unfortunately, Garfield curtly cut down the optimistic image Subaru had in mind. If they couldn't even rely on Roswell's aid, the overwhelming power required to win simply didn't seem to exist. This was the worst witch, the one who killed even the other witches of the deadly sins and swallowed half the world.
Can't we do anything? At this rate, even the mansion is gonna get.
Everything would be engulfed, stolen by that shadow, mercilessly trampled. Was there something, anything, Subaru could do besides despair?
Wait.
Watching the witch grow distant, Subaru had the odd sense that something was wrong. Was there really no way to stop her? Was there well and truly no move that might come to mind?
Think, remember, consider, recall. Find the one thing that only applies in this particular place. There's the barrier.
What?
The barrier! The Witch of Jealousy has to fulfill the conditions to pass through the barrier covering the sanctuary. The tomb's trial hasn't been cleared, and she's a half-elf.
It was said that Satella, the Witch of Jealousy, was a silver-haired half-elf. This fact had caused Amelia to endure irrational discrimination from a great deal of people. At the same time, it was the stories about those notorious features passed down from 4 centuries ago that made him certain the Witch of Jealousy would be bound by that forest. That said, if the witch turned out to be something like a vestigial mind with no physical body, things might not go the way he hoped.
No need to worry about that.
The certainty behind the murmur made Subaru raise his eyebrows. After seeing his reaction, Garfield clicked his fangs together.
The witch has a physical body. Right now, it's just like the root of Balgrin's left wing, ain't it?
You mean like it's a weak point?
Got no other meaning. Yeah. I got it now.
Slapping Subaru's shoulder as if praising him for his insight, Garfield smiled ferociously and carried on.
She'll be begging under that disgusting veil when I finally tear her head off.
The Witch of Jealousy brazenly advanced straight toward the boundary of the sanctuary, dragging Shadow behind her. Chasing after that vast body of shadow, Subaru, or rather Garfield carrying Subaru, set out, traversing the treetops and circling around the witch's path.
Don't know how much effect the barrier'll have, but if she weakens even a little, Garfield's claws would have an opening. If that was the case, even the Witch of Jealousy would not escape unscathed. I was confident because I had personally experienced what it was like to face Garfield when he was in his beast form. I needed no explanation to know that a single blow from the bestial Garfield contained overwhelming raw power. The only other thing we needed was a way to guarantee the two would clash, and for that, Garfield, she's drawn to me. So,
Hey, if you're telling me to use you as a decoy, I'll bite your fingers off one by one.
Leaping through the forest from branch to branch, Garfield chewed out Subaru over his proposal. Faced with a standoffish attitude, Subaru was daunted for a moment. Then he lobbed an angry retort.
I'm not saying this is some kind of joke. Barrier and decoy. They'll make our chances better, even if only a bit. Isn't that right? Isn't that right?
Oh, shut up. If you're gonna be that ignorant, I'll throw you overboard right now.
You should know already about the miasma coming from my body that attracts it.
Irritated by Garfield's stubborn attitude, Subaru brought up the miasma swirling around him on his own. Surely Garfield could not refute an argument made on that basis. However,
The old hag and Rom and everyone else. They all got swallowed up right before my eyes.
what's...
Like I'm gonna live with the shame of letting even a bastard like you join them. The scars of Parara Garara never fade. No way in hell I'd accept that. These scars will be carved on the witch's heart.
Eyes bloodshot, Garfield vented his raging emotions as he adamantly pushed away Subaru's plan. Garfield's anger stemmed from stubbornness, the pointless kind, at that. Subaru understood why the inner voice of his cold, callous side spat out that Garfield's insistence was worthless. But the rest of Subaru couldn't laugh at him at all. After all, unlike Subaru, who had arrived late to the scene, Garfield had witnessed the horrors with his own eyes, watching Ram, Ryuzu, and all the other people he cared about get swallowed whole, vanishing within the shadow. But even after so many precious people were stolen from him, Garfield refused to use revenge as an excuse to throw all decency aside. He wouldn't tolerate any talk about a victory that involved sacrificing Subaru. If this was indeed the rationality and conviction at Garfield's core that guided his actions,
Then how could he be capable of doing that to everyone? How had he ended up killing the brave villagers in Otto when he shielded me in such a cruel manner? When he too knew full well the pain of losing something precious, the sadness of loss.
we're here. With no answer to that question forthcoming, the pair arrived at their destination. They had chosen a tiny open space within the forest as the site of the decisive battle. The forest had been clear-cut there, leaving the waning moon and the stars overhead as the only audience to witness the Witch of Jealousy's return to the stage. Behind them was the barrier. Ahead of them, Subaru sensed a wriggling shadow drawing closer. The witch was headed straight toward them. All that remained was to counterattack, but there was a simple problem with that.
Garfield, what are you gonna do? The barrier affects you the same way, right?
Half-bloods, mixed-blood demi-humans, could not go past the forest's barrier. That applied to both Garfield and the witch. If he was weakened, it wouldn't matter how much power the witch lost. In response, Garfield took something out of his loincloth, and that something was...
A crystal? That's yours? That's yours?
I don't owe you an explanation. Just shut up and watch. Gonna put this early rising witch back to sleep so fast that we won't need decoys or anything else.
The crystal glimmered blue, a glimmer he had laid eyes upon several times amid the twists and turns surrounding the sanctuary. He knew that Garfield possessed one identical to the one Frederica owned. In earlier laps he had been through in the current time loop, Subaru had seen those crystals change hands several times over. Even now, he still didn't know the finer details surrounding the items, but
Who's there?
the faint sound of footfalls landing on grass made Subaru instantly turn around. It was not the witch. The direction and the mental pressure were far too different to be her. However, that alone wasn't a reason to lower his guard.
Huh?
And yet, the instant he set eyes upon the newcomer, Subaru's caution was blotted out by shock. A thicket parted, and a young girl emerged. He had seen her before. The long pink hair and a white poncho-style outfit. Her ears were a little longer than those of the average person, making her impossible to mix up with someone else. This was Ryuzu, the representative of the sanctuary who had allegedly been swallowed up by the shadow. But there was no way this was Ryuzu. What Subaru saw next completely refuted that possibility.
Is this some kind of joke?
Multiple figures stepped barefoot onto the grass and made their way through the underbrush. Every single one wore the same clothing, the same expression, the same demeanor. In fact, all of them were perfectly identical. More than 20 perfect copies of Ryuzu appeared from all directions. The great throng of girls bearing the same face as Ryuzu were silent, not speaking a single word, their expressions unchanging. The girls gathered together and stood in a loose row at Garfield's back. There was no way Subaru could call it a sight for sore eyes. It was like something straight out of a nightmare.
Didn't want to show you this if I didn't have to.
Unlike Subaru's obvious astonishment, Garfield reacted with only a slightly bitter comment, showing no sign that he was amazed. This wasn't something worth gaping over for him. As Subaru slowly overcame his initial surprise, A realization dawned on him. He had probably met one of the people in this group face to face already.
The moment we got here, I was teleported to the forest out of the blue. It had occurred right after the magical relocation I experienced upon arriving at the sanctuary. The crystal had reacted to the barrier, and the power of the stone had sent me flying into the woods. It must have been one of the perfect copies of Ryuzu that had led the stranded me to the tomb. Once I reunited with Amelia, Otto, and the others, Ram had admonished me to conceal the fact that I had encountered the elven girl. Until that very moment, I had shoved the girl into a corner of my memory. However, given this unexpected reunion, I understood for the first time that it had been a mistake to overlook that first encounter.
As the doll-like girl? No, girls stood in silence. It was evident that they were identical beings.
Don't tell me these are clones? Copies? Is that even possible?
Seeing the girls easily evoked those words in the back of Subaru's brain. They were terms deeply associated with stories that had science-fictional themes. But they were a poor fit for his new world, a place dominated by swords and spells. In the first place, who could have reproduced that kind of technology?
Sorry to interrupt your thoughts, but it's time.
Giving the confused Subaru a shove on the shoulder, Garfield reoriented himself toward the forest. The impending pressure was making the hair on Subaru's back stand up as he glanced back and forth between the forest and the girls.
Garfield, don't tell me your plan is…
Crush her with numbers. Reed always fights head on. You know.
Bringing both fists together in front of his chest, Garfield revealed that his plan followed the doctrine of simple is best. There was no hidden twist, but there was no argument that it wasn't the most suitable choice. Of course, it was an operation that accepted there would be casualties.
Don't get bent out o' shape worrying over them. They ain't like the old hag. This lot is totally empty on the inside. Still, they should be able to follow orders, no problem. We'll make an open and take that bastard Stam head.
There was no time to lodge any complaint about the operation, nor to ask the girls, the copies, what they thought.
As for you, let me say sorry in advance.
That was all Garfield said in the final moments before Subaru was thrust into the heart of a new battlefield. Not comprehending the meaning of the words, the powerless Subaru was relegated to the rear. Garfield stood at the head of the formation with the 20-odd copies lined up behind him while Subaru brought up the rear. With their formation decided, an eerie moment of tranquility settled into place, filled only with his breathing and the beating of his heart. Slowly, the menace showed itself as it trespassed upon the world. The forest was being slain before his eyes. Swallowed by a shadow of immense mass, the trees lost their shape like something dissolving into water, leaving no trace behind as the very concepts of tree and forest were contaminated by shadow. This was heresy. This was violation. This was a slaughter. The witch, blotting out the world with her love, noticed Subaru standing in the path of her advance. And then…
I love you.
Subaru was beset by an unending revulsion. His instincts kept clamorously ringing an alarm bell to shout danger. After uttering that lone phrase, the witch leaped over Garfield and the Ryuzu Brigade, whispering her love to no one but Subaru. In that instant, the witch directed all her interest and concern onto Subaru and Subaru alone.
Gah!
A moment later, the ground exploded, kicking up plumes of dust. Garfield leaped up like he had been launched from a slingshot. Garfield's mouth was open wide, fangs bared as he hurtled toward the shadow. As Subaru watched, he saw Garfield's entire body swell up, as his clothing ripped from the inside, unable to endure the expansion of his flesh. His entire body became covered in golden fur, and his hands and feet transformed into bestial claws. Garfield the great tiger, the ferocious beast Subaru was hard-pressed to forgive, had reared his head. Roaring as he went, the savage tiger's speed exceeded all normal bounds. Given how his beastly movements were unchanged, it was apparent that Garfield had nullified the effect of the barrier somehow. Accordingly, with neither hesitation nor sorrow, he brought his fangs down to bite into the pitch-black dress and rip it apart. Instantly, shadows stretched away from the witch's feet, coiling around the leaping great tiger. The shadows bound the great tiger's limbs, stealing away his momentum and trapping the growling creature. As dark tendrils sank into animal limbs as thick as Subaru's hips, the sound of tearing flesh rang out, accompanied by the spurting of a bloody mist. There was a scream. The raging great tiger heaved as the shadows tightened their hold and cruelly tore into his body. While Subaru could only watch helplessly with wide eyes, the Ryuzu copies that Garfield had summoned and left on standby began to join the battle. Letting out unemotional voices devoid of intelligence, the young girl sprinted toward the shadow all at once. Moving with surprising swiftness, they pursued the great tiger held captive by the shadow, drawing closer to the witch all the while. A pair of copies leaped in with arms spread wide as if inviting the witch into their embrace. Just before they could close the distance, shadows burst outward in the shape of spears, impaling them in the abdomen and hoisting them aloft. Two girls with identical faces, impaled through their abdomens, were lined up at the same height as Garfield, his four limbs still bound. The shadows swayed their bodies back and forth as if to mock him. It was excessively vicious. However, the witch's overconfidence had caused her to make a mistake. There was barely any warning before the change occurred, but it was the change itself that was grand and terrible.
What?
The two impaled Ryuzas began emitting a pale light, and a second later, scattered in every direction like an explosion. Their battered bodies transformed into particles of light, blowing away the shadow surrounding them. For a single moment, this breathed life back into the world steeped in shadowy darkness and started a chain reaction. Following the two who had been blown away, the remaining copies shouted at the witch, all at once, launching a suicide charge against her. It had already been demonstrated that an all-out charge with no thought for survival would prove effective. In response, the witch didn't hesitate to direct all her shadows to meet the girls rushing at her. The shadows welled up, dividing into groups to crush the girls trying to overwhelm the witch with sheer numbers. There were 5 razor-edged shadows for each of the girls, a mass of about 100 raging limbs dancing madly as they fell upon the girls who tried to take evasive action. The shadows impaled and rent skulls and bodies alike as they sliced the girls to death. Leaping all at the same moment, the remaining copies launched a simultaneous attack from numerous directions. Now that their little schemes had all been defeated by brute force, the Ryuzas used their last option, transforming into pale light and exploding one after another in a staggered rhythmical fashion, which temporarily thinned the shadows spawned by the witch, prying clear a path to the pitch-black dress behind. That was when... The fierce beast that had been riddled with wounds flew into the gap that had been wrenched open. Escaping the shadow bindings during the replica's suicide attack, the ferocious beast crouched low to the ground, and immediately following the pale blue explosions of light, a roar seemed to break through that dazzling glow as the claws of a wild animal swung at the witch. The great tiger became a torrential gale that surged forward as the witch bundled a few remaining shadows to form a blocking wall. However, the great tiger swung an arm toward the bulwark of shadows, pulling a silhouette forward with its front paw, slamming the last of the replica's home, pulverizing the wall and his own arm. Then fang and claw pierced the veil of pale light, sinking deep into the dress of shadow.
He got her. The setup had been so perfect that I was certain of the final outcome. Without any regrets, the 21 Ryuzu replicas had expended themselves in a self-destructive suicide charge. Against a blow delivered at such a high cost, even the Witch of Jealousy had to be...
I love you.
The firm belief to which Subaru clung was rebuffed and smashed to pieces, along with Garfield, who turned to bloody mist. Speechless, all Subaru could do was watch as the golden-colored great tiger was eviscerated. His claws should have torn the witch's body apart, and his fangs should have crushed her skull. The tiger's murderous intent could have pulverized a human body with ease. Not even a witch would have been able to endure it. Assuming the attack struck home, what had robbed Garfield of his life were shadowy blades that had slipped into his body through the wounds on his limbs. The shadows that had initially bound Garfield used his wounds as an entryway to race around, cutting his body to shreds from within. In other words, Garfield's death had been decided the moment he suffered his first injury. His life had been whittled down relentlessly. There were no words for the cruelty of that act. The fragments of flesh that were once Garfield were mercilessly scattered about the murky black ground. Even these were swallowed by shadow, all traces of his existence erased. The Ryuzu replicas had also been annihilated, so only Subaru and the witch remained. No, that wasn't right.
I love you.
From the beginning, the witch had no eyes for anyone but Subaru. rooted to where he stood, not Garfield, slashed to death, not the Rizu replicas, slaughtered, not the people of the sanctuary and Earlham village, no doubt engulfed by shadow at a time unbeknownst to him, not Ram, not Otto, not Ryuzu, not Roswell, not Patlish, not Emilia. Anything and everything else was a distant afterthought.
I love you.
Shut up!
I love you. 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 I love you.
I said shut up!
As Subaru stood still, the witch walked along a path formed of shadow, moving past the clearing to approach him. Her contours were hazy. He couldn't even put a finger on her height. Just as before, he could not distinguish her voice. And yet, her clingy zeal alone touched Subaru's heart without reservation to an abominable extent.
I love you. 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 I love you.
To the immobile Subaru, the witch whispered her love as if was a curse. She acted more out of place and was worse at reading people than even Subaru. Not only did her whispers of love inspire anger in him, the adoration she was offered was completely selfish. Her love was repulsive. But in that moment, what sent Subaru into even more of a rage was,
I love you. 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 Subaru.
You don't get to call me that!
that sweet, enchanted form of address made Subaru explode in anger. The charming voice, the sweet gesture, the feverish way in which she said it rubbed Subaru the worst way possible.
Who gave you permission to call me that name? Don't screw with me! God damn it.
It was a form of address filled with trust, with pride, with mutual love meant for those who stood at each other's side. In that world, there was only one person Subaru permitted to address him by his first name, imbued with such affection.
This ain't a joke. That's for one person alone. Who the hell would? No! Letting you go for what you've done, forgiving even one lock of your hair or one part of a single cell of yours is too good for you.
Indignant, Subaru let his anger rain mercilessly, driving home the maelstrom of emotion swirling inside his chest. He had no chance of victory. He had no chance of survival. Besides, that world held no reason for him to live on anymore. Even so, he absolutely could not simply stand and watch her trample on that bond as she pleased.
I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you.
Her love was relentless. That was why Subaru absolutely refused to respond to that love.
In this world, when I heard I love you spoken seriously to me for the first time, it gave me, an unredeemable bastard, enough power to make me think I could become a hero.
He was a piece of garbage, twisted down, broken, and ready to flee from everything, but those words had made him believe he could face the future head on, never giving in, to challenge it once more, over and over, however many times that it took. Compared to that, the substance of the witch's love was insultingly weak.
I love you. 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 I love you.
The number 1 and number 2 spots in my heart ain't changin'. There's no place in there for the likes of you.
She started it. He finished it. Subaru's visage contorted vilely as he flatly enumerated those he loved.
So I'll roll up your love and toss it aside. And if I've got to compare...
He had no way to mount a physical attack, but he still had verbal attacks. Getting on other people's nerves was a particular specialty of his. What could he say? What should he say? That would rub the witch the worst way. There was no one better armed to get under someone else's skin than Subaru. So he knew. Accordingly, Subaru gave a shallow, cruel laugh, turning a look of scorn toward the witch.
I'd rather love Echidna and the other witches than you.
The instant he made the statement, the witch's curse, like words of love, halted for the first time. And then, in an instant, Subaru's field of vision and the world itself was swallowed by shadow.
I love you. I love you. I love you. Love me.
Amid the darkness, he heard a voice. Swallowed by shadow, he was upside down and shaken around. Not only his body, but the inside of his skull was being ransacked as the shadow whipped Subaru Natsuki about. Within, as Subaru Natsuki dissolved into the shadow, he heard a whisper.
Love me. 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 Love me.
It was horrifying. He trembled in ecstasy. He shuddered in fear. He cried tears of joy. He spat blood in a rage. He cried out in exultation. His emotions were being sliced apart, bounced around, as what was right became wrong and what was wrong became right. Subaru Natsuki's field of vision was growing hazy. He knew his body was being dissolved. Why did he know that? Was it Subaru Natsuki who knew, or was it something else? Inside the shadow, he sensed some kind of separate presence beyond the whispers of love. No, he did not sense them, for they were not separate at all. It was Subaru. It was Subaru Natsuki. If he was dissolved, mixed, and combined with one mass, there would be no boundary between him and others. Everything that had been swallowed would become Subaru Natsuki. There was warmth, sadness, hatred, generosity, dejection, ecstasy, despair, relief, lamentation, satisfaction. Yes, there was satisfaction. Amid the many despairs and many laments, there was satisfaction. That satisfaction was a part of Subaru. If that could fill Subaru, then... He reached a hand out toward the satisfaction. No, it was not a hand. He had no body to be found. No, that was not so. His body had been swallowed by shadow, so it was all there. His dissolved heart, his crumbling consciousness, the remains of Subaru Natsuki's soul. There they were all gathered together. And in gathering them, he comprehended the reason why they were gathered. There was heat. Subaru Natsuki felt heat in the midst of his return. And so to a place completely different than that false satisfaction, he extended an arm, a right wrist. And then, in that darkness-colored world, a prayer-imbued handkerchief glimmered vividly. His consciousness floated upward. As if in struggling to reach the water surface in search of oxygen, he frantically clawed against the darkness, desperately moving higher. His consciousness was enshrouded in darkness. It was as if he had sunk into a swamp. His mind was immersed in weight and weariness, yet Subaru earnestly pressed on even so. At the end of his struggling, his field of vision suddenly opened. Subaru's mind had floated back up to the real world. He had returned from the world of shadow alive. But that did not mean he had escaped peril by any stretch.
Ha! Ah! Ah!
His breathing was clumsy. There was some kind of shadow stuffed in his throat. His feet were not on the ground. Bound by shadow, his body was being held aloft at an angle. He could not move. He was not being allowed to move. But as if clinging to it, he touched the handkerchief wrapped around his right wrist with his left hand.
Petra's handkerchief.
In that world covered by shadow, Subaru's field of vision was dyed the color of darkness. Amid that pitch blackness, Petra's handkerchief alone dazzled, radiating a white light as if trying to drive off the dark. The feelings with which Petra's handkerchief was imbued had granted this miracle to Subaru. No, such a thought was hard to justify. Subaru had a different culprit in mind for the crafty trick that had saved him. Namely, the Witch of Greed, who had touched that handkerchief upon the occasion of his departure, leaving words of deep import with him.
That damn Echidna! Did she know this would happen, damn it?
It's insurance. Just to be safe, he could almost hear the witch's face say as it floated up in the back of his mind. That one time, he was well and truly grateful for that inconsiderate, boastful witch. If not for that light, Subaru would surely have been engulfed by the shadow, vanishing without a trace. What was happening inside that shadow? It was a blender. The shadow was dissolving Subaru's very being. It was melting him and mixing him into something else. Everything that had been swallowed by shadow, mixed with all the many things that had been swallowed whole by the witch's shadow. Becoming one with those who had been melted before him had exposed Subaru to a great many emotions. Coursing into him were sensations, feelings, memories, knowledge that was not his own. It became natural to be instantly aware of those things as they let themselves in, carving into his body, his mind, and his soul. He'd escaped by a hair's breadth. He'd escaped with his life with only fractions of a second to spare. Being engulfed by that shadow was not death. Subaru Natsuki would be stirred into something else, erased through becoming part of a heterogeneous whole. That was an intolerable defeat, one from which even return by death could not bring him back. Had it not been for Echidna's aid, Subaru would have come to an end, unable to slip out of the shadow's embrace. It was because he could feel that in his bones that he wanted to call the witch right back to thank her.
Goo.
But delaying the inevitable with Echidna's aid had gone as far as it could. Slowly, Subaru's body was being engulfed by the shadow once more. As if his lower body was sinking into the ground, as if his extremities were being meticulously digested bit by bit, the witch's shadow was consuming Subaru. He was gradually losing himself. Not only was the sense of loss frightening, but the relief. There was relief. There was joy that he would be swallowed, dissipated, and erased, his fate arriving at its end. Accordingly, he was certain in his belief. He could not die from being engulfed by shadow. He would continue to be loved forever.
Damn it all.
The light created by the witch had bought him tens of seconds, but that postponement would not save Subaru's life. It was only a brief matter of time until he was pulled in and erased. Just what did Echidna want there?
That shitty witch.
The instant he arrived at his conclusion, Subaru cast aside his gratitude from the moment just prior, tearing at the light with his left hand. The single saving grace was the light that had saved Subaru, brushing aside the shadow engulfing him, and it was here that Echidna's desire rested. Echidna had a goal. Echidna had left in Subaru's hands the means to accomplish it. It was a lifeline not for saving Subaru but to let him take his own life. As if sensing his tragic resolve, the light changed shape, transforming into a radiant dagger. She had no doubt thought it would be difficult to accomplish with nothing but a single handkerchief. Her polite consideration brought tears to his eyes. It was just, though they were tears, what coursed out were tears of blood. He closed his eyes, let out his breath, and with that impetus, he thrust the dagger of light toward his own throat. Though the sharpness of the blade of light was unclear, it penetrated his windpipe with ease. Blood coursed backward into the fatal wound, and as it flowed from his throat down to his lungs, his consciousness began to drown. The protective charm of light was not a weapon. Echidna had put it in his hands so that he could take his own life. That was what the postponement of tens of seconds was for, so that he might realize, so that he might carry it out, so that he might return by death. Echidna had most likely anticipated that the Witch of Jealousy would appear outside of the tomb. The reason why remained unclear to Subaru, but he had to pay for it with his life. For the first time, Subaru's suicide caused the Witch of Jealousy to shout something other than her love. However, drowning in his own blood, already having let go of his consciousness, Subaru did not comprehend the words. But he stretched his hand toward the face of the witch covered in shadow as if it was the natural thing to do. It seemed right. The dagger of light fell away, and the fingers of the final vestiges of light touched the shadowy veil. The veil came apart, and the half of the witch's face hidden by the shadow was exposed to him. She had purple eyes that were like gemstones. She had shimmering silver hair that was like moonlight, and she had a lovely and familiar face. Seeing that face twisted in grief, he felt not so much surprise as pain within his chest. Sadness had impaled his chest. With his throat filled with blood, he could not form proper words. Nonetheless, to the one before his eyes, the sad girl who spilled countless tears, he made a declaration.
I will save you.
The instant he stated it, Subaru Natsuki lost his life. When he straddled death, the first piece of reality to arrive was the bitter taste of dust. Whew! Skilljet spat out foreign substances tasting of dirt along with his saliva. After that, Subaru sat up and confirmed that he had been lying on a floor in a cold, dark room. The stone walls were very faintly glowing blue, and it was tranquil enough to rattle your nerves. He was inside the tomb.
I've returned.
With a raspy voice opening and closing his hands right before his eyes, Subaru made the result of Return by Death sink in. His memory from just before was still fresh, both from having been swallowed by Shadow and having ended his own life. So too, the violent pain in his throat, not the first time I've killed myself, is it? The sharp sensation boring into his throat, the feeling of it being gouged out. This made Subaru breathe hard. There was the suffering of drowning in his own blood, and the sense of loss from his consciousness slipping away. No matter how many times he'd tasted death, the horror never dulled. No matter how many times or instances he felt death, it never got easier. He was afraid of death. Death was terrifying. It was painful, agonizing, yet even so,
coming back beats the hell out of ending with everything lost.
he'd chosen to come back. In that place, he'd chosen death without hesitation. This way, Subaru could still fight. He could resist. He could fight to win his future.
But I can't get all mushy about death all the same. I still have things I have to do.
Gazing anew at those things he had to do, Subaru tried to calm the sound of his heart as he checked around. Having returned to the tomb, there was a silver-haired girl lying right at Subaru's side. This was the tomb, the starting point of Return by Death, where Amelia was continuing her nightmare about her past. He had to shake her slender shoulder and awaken her from that nightmare. Tell her she didn't have to go through those terrible thoughts anymore. Gently embrace her. Those were the first things Subaru ought to do. Hence, as Amelia gasped in anguish, Subaru gently stretched a hand out toward her.
The hell?
There was a tiny tremble in his fingers as he tried to touch Amelia with them. Wondering what was up, he tried to stop the shaking in his fingers. However, though Subaru was aware of the trembling, his fingertips disregarded his will. If anything, the trembling increased. And that was not all. A strange clattering sound was echoing off the stone walls. The annoying sound and the trembling fingers left Subaru confused as to what in the world was going on. But belatedly he realized. The clattering was coming from Subaru's teeth. Without his teeth pressed together, his jaw was trembling, causing the miserable rattling. It was as if Subaru was hesitating out of cowardice. His fingers continued to tremble, and his teeth kept clacking. The cause behind that trembling was the face he had seen on the other side of that shadowy veil.
Why am I shaking? Don't tell me I'm afraid of...
He had seen the witch's face in the moment just prior to Return by Death, and it was the same face as Amelia's. After straddling death to come back, he had dragged along a fear of the witch that stuck with him. Enough fear to make his soul forget a very basic thing. Amelia was not the witch of jealousy.
A stupid trick like that? Come on, I know better than that, damn it!
Zero Starting Life in Another World by Tappy Nagatsuki, casted six-tail novel. Please subscribe to our channel.
Subro didn't know what had brought on the sudden revival play. However, he did have an idea of why the witch had taken that form. There was one possibility he could think of. The witch had probably manifested in the sanctuary through taking possession of Amelia's body. Betelgeuse, an archbishop of the seven deadly sins, had been an evil spirit able to possess the bodies of others. Knowing of that madman, Subaru could easily accept the possibility that the witch could take over other people's bodies as well. What had convinced him the most was that it perfectly explained everything Garfiel's demeanor had implied. For the plan to use the barrier, Garfield had been absolutely certain the witch had a physical body. Subaru's memory was also fresh that he had said he was sorry in advance, just prior to the decisive battle against the witch. In other words, Garfield had seen the witch possess Amelia. That was why he hadn't given a clear answer as to whether Amelia was dead or alive, and why he'd apologized to Subaru for striking down both the witch and Amelia turned Avatar. It added up, it explained everything. That was it. Wasn't it nothing more than that? It had nothing to do with Amelia. It wasn't any knock against her. There was no reason to be afraid of... Quit it with the bald-faced lying, his inner self coldly spat. Bald-faced lying. His inner self's words made Subaru aware that he was deceiving himself. He was not afraid of Amelia. That was the truth. But that was one thing. His fear of the witch was in another dimension.
Subaru's return by death was through the power of the witch of jealousy. That was Subaru's opinion, and Echidna's had affirmed his own. And understanding this meant that the witch of jealousy possessed the power to roll back time. Therefore, it was not unthinkable for her to employ the same power with which she made him return by death to go back in time herself. Subaru couldn't firmly declare that she wouldn't or couldn't. The possibility terrified him. There was no answer to that question. In its place, there was an answer lying right at his side. Touching Amelia and making her awaken would make everything become clear. If Amelia opened her eyes, smiling softly as she always did, all those things would become a needless worry. But if that wish was not to be granted,
Emmy! Leah!
whether he sought to save her or sought to be saved himself, he no longer could tell even that. But he thought that the fact that his voice called her name and the finger touching her cheek did not shake was miracle enough for him. Her pale cheek transferred enough warmth to his fingertip that he thought it would melt. Her long eyelashes trembled slightly, and light came to rest in her downcast eyes. Her purple eyes blinked several times as they beheld Subaru in them. And then,
Subaru?
when he heard her whispered voice, something heavy dissolved inside of Subaru. One word, hearing that single call, let Subaru make the fear up to the moment before into a thing of the past. Everything about it was different from the false love that had been showered upon him.
This is until now. I've been.
Subaru let out a long breath, slightly perplexed by the lack of a reply. Amelia slowly sat up, knitting her brows as she looked around the room in which they were. Awakening from her nightmare, her comprehension was belated. However, she gradually caught up to reality.
Ah,
That tiny voice probably trickled out from remembering something about the dream she saw. He knew that Amelia would immediately descend into a panic. He had already seen Amelia's heart crushed by her past 3 times over. He had to offer her gentle comforting. For the sake of that, without hurting her in any way, he had to call out to her to tell her it was all right.
Subaru.
And yet, in spite of Subaru having prepared to do just that, Amelia engaged in an action completely contrary to his expectations. Her panicked eyes had already regained their calm. Her lips, on the verge of trembling, were now pursed with a strong will. To a surprised Subaru, Amelia proceeded to gently reach out with her hand as she spoke.
Why do you have such a pained look on your face?
Itch went the broken breath that trickled out of him. Subaru was frozen in surprise as Amelia's finger gently stroked his cheek. Her white fingertip gently wiped the corner of his eye, pulling down the dam, holding back the tears welling up, letting them fall freely. There were tears. Only then did Subaru realize that he'd been on the verge of completely breaking down. Once he realized the fact, it only took him a moment to crumble. The tremors that hit him were in a totally different dimension from what had afflicted his fingers and teeth from moments before. The trembling robbed him of his body's internal strength, and Subaru, who had been on his knees, lost his balance, sinking onto his rear.
It's all right, Subaru. I'm here, I'm right here.
As his crumpling body leaned forward, a delicate touch embraced him from the front. Amelia's temperature was hot enough that he could feel it through the thin fabric of his clothing. A gentle beating came through the chest where he laid his head. He could tell that relief was filling the cracks of his broken heart. Relief. Yes, this was beyond all doubt relief. That Amelia had remained herself, that the witch had not stolen her body away. And pathetic as it was, Subaru's body had chosen quivering and crying as its way of expressing that relief.
I'm so sorry, making you worry like that. It's all right. It's all right.
As Subaru trembled and cowered, Amelia gently consoled him, calling out to him over and over as if pitying him. Ever so quietly, Amelia continued to console Subaru in that fashion.
So that is how Lady Amelia returned with crybaby Barusu in tow.
Somehow, that sounds like the title of a fairy tale or something.
Subaru had bawled his eyes out and Amelia had consoled him. The time of warmth and being pathetic had come to an end. When their legs brought them out of the tomb, Ram was there to greet them, and having listened to the circumstances, she made the aforementioned kind words. Unfortunately, Subaru, well aware of how pathetic he was, had no mental energy left with which to refute her.
After having raced inside in such dramatic fashion, he faints just like he did during the day, causing trouble to the Lady Amelia he was supposed to save.
Why are you alive exactly?
I said I have no mental energy. That's not a reason to come after me even more. You know.
That's right, Ram. Subaru was worried about me. Those feelings are precious.
Ram, unable to conceal her scorn, emitted a heavy sigh as her shoulders fell. When Subaru lodged an objection about her demeanor, Amelia, completely recovered, offered him reassuring support. Amelia stood at Subaru's side, angling her refined eyebrows in a dignified manner as she continued.
Though given that he went out of his way to help me, it is really disappointing that he ended up collapsing all of a sudden and broke down crying from worry after.
Amelia Tan? Amelia Tan? I'm going to cry all over again.
But lately, Subaru's done nothing but help me, so a part of me is relieved that Subaru showed me his weak side like that.
Touching a hand to her chest, Amelia's words caused Subaru to unwittingly catch his breath. Amelia had an overinflated view of Subaru's worth. Up to that point, Subaru had showed her his pathetic side on more than one occasion. This time was only the latest example in the long list of embarrassing moments since they had first met.
I'm both happy and embarrassed to hear you say that, Amelia Tan, but I don't really want to show you stuff like that much.
Hey, why not?
That's because I always want to show Amelia Tan my cool side. I want you to forget that I'm really a weak, pathetic, totally unsalvageable guy.
Sheesh. I won't hate you just because you show me a few moments of weakness, Subaru.
Amelia put her hands on her hips, cheeks puffing up in indignation. Subaru tried his best to smile to gloss things over. Amelia's words were kind, but Subaru's vanity didn't let him gain any comfort from them. His displeasure was completely unrelated to Amelia's personality, and it certainly wasn't because he was worried about disappointing her. This was simply Subaru's stubbornness talking.
Aren't you full of yourself? Seeing you act this pig-headed makes it difficult to believe you are fresh from bawling your eyes out.
And their big sis goes pouring cold water on right when things were going nicely. Now, do not say that, Mr. Natsuki. Miss Ram's demeanor belies her concern. When she had no idea what was occurring inside, Miss Ram was particularly worried out of...
Otto looked quite pleased with himself, but one cross look from Ram instantly made it fade away. No way she's seriously acting sour because of an adorable reason like that, thought Subaru as he squinted at Ram.
What?
No? Nothing at all.
But her sharp glare made him beat a hasty retreat as well. Unlike Otto, the damage to him was light because he was more accustomed to facing off against Ram. Either way, Ram and Otto had been there to warmly greet Subaru and Amelia upon their return. That being the case, the remaining issue became quite simple.
His averted gaze fell upon a golden-haired youth standing nearby with his arms folded, Garfield. The sight made Subaru's cheeks harden, and he strove to conceal his emotions behind them. Subaru's feelings toward Garfield were exceptionally conflicted. It was a fact that he had temporarily cooperated with Subaru in the battle against the witch. The memory of his gruesome death was still burned on the back of Subaru's eyelids, and so Subaru accepted that fact. But he also remembered the great many he had cruelly killed in the world prior to that. That was the reason Subaru couldn't lower his guard, especially not right after a return by death. The reason for Garfield's hostility, the witch's miasma, would currently be at its thickest. How would he move?
With Subaru under that tension, Garfield clacked his fangs and spoke up.
When you charged in there, I wasn't sure what was gonna happen, but I'm relieved you made it out safe. It's sound. I can't laugh at you for it. The wind can't bring down Gafgari on fruit all.
Hey, wait us! Ow! Oh!
Garfield laughed heartily as he violently swatted Subaru's shoulder. The slap was hard enough to make Subaru's entire body go numb, which made him shudder and think, he's gonna do it with everyone watching. But he sensed no malice coming from Garfield's smiling face. He was simply welcoming Subaru and Amelia back after they returned safe and sound. The reaction was a little, no, absolutely, beyond his expectations.
That's it?
Yeah, wah, are you such a crybaby ya need me to rub your head and say it's all right?
Like that'd make anyone feel better. That's not what I meant, but nah.
Subaru pulled back his tongue on the verge of saying something that risked stirring up a hornet's nest. After all, the current Garfield didn't seem to bear him any ill will. That at least was something to be welcomed.
I was kinda worried if I'd stuck around you, you'd look down on me for my body odor.
The heck are ya? Me? I really don't like being associated with body odor like that.
Just take that as meaning it's an issue with my body, would you? More importantly, let's sit down somewhere before discuss all the fine details. Talking while we're standing like this isn't great, right?
That's true. Subaru must be tired from crying so much. After all,
Amelia Tan.
She responded to Subaru's sorrowful voice by sticking out her tongue. I'm sorry, she offered an cutesy apology. Forgiving her teasing because of how adorable she was, Subaru harbored a different set of thoughts within his chest.
This time, unlike all prior runs, Amelia had not become terribly despondent due to failing the trial. The trigger for that change was the pathetic reality of Amelia recovering from panic faster than Subaru, but either way, this time she had confronted her past but still retained a strong heart. It was not set in stone that her mental state would have a positive effect on the trial going forward, but it's worth giving it a shot, huh? Mr. Natsuki, is something the matter? Nothing, really.
As the group started to change locations, Otto called out to Subaru when he began lagging behind. Responding with a shrug of his shoulders, Subaru quickly caught up to them. Amelia's heart was still unbroken by the trial and Garfield remained neutral. The circumstances surrounding the sanctuary had shown him different faces upon every repetition. This time proved no exception, but Subaru was keenly aware how this was the most solid starting situation to date.
After that, it comes down to what I try and what I get out of it, huh? To hell with dying for nothing. I have to use death more effectively. All the death until that point had meaning to it, even the repeated deaths of the world and the sanctuary. Hence, making it back from inside that shadow has got to be worth something.
His head complained of slight pain. In a corner of his mind rested a lingering memory of being mixed with other people. Surely something in there could provide some meaning to his death, and that chance encounter with the witch. The party left the tomb, heading toward Ryuzu's residence, which served as a de facto inn. Where the conversation passing between them in the guest room was concerned, there was no great change in the issues regarding the trial. But unlike before, there was the exceptionally major difference that Amelia was participating in that conversation. Up until the last run, Amelia had been wedged between her sense of duty and her fear toward her past, with the seemingly insurmountable weight causing her to waste away. But this time was different.
I'm sorry about today. I made everyone worry, and I really caused trouble for Subaru, but I think it's plain to see that I have to do this.
Subaru could not tell what everyone thought of Amelia proclaiming her determination at the end of the meeting. But for his part, Subaru was proud of her, feeling a desire to applaud. In fact, he did. On that note, the day's meeting came to a conclusion, adjourning so that people might prepare for the morrow.
Amelia Tan, make sure you bundle up. Take your time and rest, okay? If you don't feel sleepy anymore, I can stay by your bedside from good night to good morning, but
I'm completely all right. You need a break as much as I do, don't you, Subaru? Noon and night makes twice you've collapsed in that tomb today, so
I guess it does. Yeah, you're right. I'll take care too. As Subaru gave Amelia her send-off to bed, her observation made him scratch his head and give off a vague smile. Having accepted this change in Amelia, Subaru hadn't told anyone about him and the tomb. In other words, the fact that he had taken the trial and overcome the first part. This was out of consideration for Amelia, for if she knew Subaru had overcome the trial she had failed, it would make her harbor unnecessary thoughts of self-reproach. If this time Amelia could preserve a strong mental state, then the results of her second attempt might change as well. He remained hopeful. And even if the result was the same, the knowledge of that was still something worth obtaining. There was value in trying. More importantly, this time Subaru wouldn't be overly focusing on clearing the tomb. If he challenged the tomb, he could meet Echidna within the trial once more. There was no mistake that this would be of aid to him, but at the moment Subaru lacked the qualifications sufficient to meet her. His preparations were insufficient. He was still lacking new information, new results, new everything. Under these circumstances, even if he met Echidna, it would only amount to her indulging Subaru. He would rather avoid that if he could help it. Accordingly, Subaru needed to accumulate something that was merited another meeting with the witch. For that sake as well, Subaru's current top priority was proving that the memories resting inside of his head were not mistaken. Ram, I need to talk to you for a second. Is now good?
How indecent.
You jump to bad-sounding conclusions fast.
After parting with Amelia, Subaru addressed Ram as she tidied up the guest room. Staying in the Ryuzu residence were Amelia and Roswal, and Ram, who was tending to their needs for 3 guests total. By rights, Subaru ought to have been spending the night with the people of Earlham Village and the cathedral, but
today I have something that comes first. You remember the promise we discussed before challenging the tomb, right?
Of course, but I am surprised that you remembered, Barusu. You had quite a busy time in the tomb, I am sure.
though she was obviously referring to him collapsing inside and crying his eyes out, Subaru kept his mouth shut about that. This was after having been laughed at for the crybaby Barusu incident aplenty. Right now, Subaru had more important things to talk about.
Anyway, the promise, by which you mean Master Roswal making time to speak with you, I take it. Because of extenuating circumstances, I want to defer that promise until later. In exchange, Ram, I want a favor from you.
How indecent.
Don't make this a running gag.
He sighed at the scowl Ram was giving him. He hadn't gone as far as scrapping the promise completely, but from her demeanor, Ram didn't think much of Subaru's arbitrary request. Even so, she shrugged her shoulders.
Fine. Master Roswal did tell me to put myself at Barusu's disposal, and should this be some manner of vulgar scheme, it is Barusu who will regret it later.
Can I just point out that I'm not looking at you with indecent eyes or anything?
I suppose not. What Barusu turns toward Ram is not a gaze of carnal desire, but something vaguer.
The sudden statement perplexed Subaru. However, he immediately realized what she was really getting at. And from Subaru's perspective, it amounted to being sucker punched from a blind spot. After all, Ram was asserting that Subaru was looking right through Ram and seeing someone else instead, even though he'd been trying his best to be careful and avoid this.
What a pathetic face. It is not a repulsive gaze, though, so I won't speak of it any further.
Noticing that Subaru was unsettled made Ram narrow her eyes. This was not exasperation or scorn, but an emotion of gloom so thin it was almost invisible to the eye. That made it stab at Subaru's chest all the more. Though their personalities differed greatly, that gentleness was commonly shared by the sisters who looked like 2 peas in a pod.
He thought it his true desire to divulge to Ram every last thing about Rem. He wanted to tell her that she had a doting little sister at the mansion trapped in a slumber from which she could not awaken. Subaru wanted to speak about the feelings, the memories he had for the 2 of them until he could speak no more. But Subaru knew of a world where this had led to Ram's attempt to sacrifice Rem. The despair and dejection of that moment kept Subaru from speaking of Rem. A world where Ram abandoned Rem. A world where Ram abandoned Rem, where the elder sister abandoned the younger, would undoubtedly drive him mad.
You had something to ask of Ram? Please close your mouth and stop making that idiotic face. It was not my intention to make you feel bad, Barusu. Ram wishes to carry out Master Roswal's instructions. To do that, all that is required is for me to listen to your story.
That's a big helper, actually. I wanted to ask a favor having to do with Garfield.
Graciously going along with Ram's rare generosity, Subaru finally reached the main issue. The name he brought up as the topic made Ram narrow her eyes just a tad.
Has something happened with Garf?
It's about what's going to happen. The odds are pretty high that he's going to get in the way of my covert activities. If I could have you keep him occupied, I can...
Seize the opportunity and give his head a good wham from behind, yes?
Even if I did that, wouldn't it just end with me being sent packing? Cheese?
In fact, Garfield's strength was so great that an ordinary person like Subaru wasn't even in the right dimension required to consider delivering a knockout blow. He'd already seen Garfield fight 3 times during their initial encounter later in his bestial state, and of course, the battle against the witch, and that was plenty. Even if Ram actually did charm him, the results of a fight would no doubt be the same. Ram seemed to agree with his assessment.
While it is true that Garf is rather taken with me, but the one has nothing to do with the other, I assume you require no explanation for how absurdly strong he is.
Yeah, if it came to violence, I'd go down in one blow.
You would hardly be worth the time. How cheeky of Garf.
Ram's manner of speaking was belied by the gentleness in her eyes whenever she spoke about Garfield. It was impossible to tell precisely what emotions lay behind those pink eyes, and Subaru, failing to glean anything, abandoned the attempt. Garfield was an obstacle. He was a wall that needed to be climbed over. There was no room to see him as anything more than that. He determined Garfield to be his foe. If Ram was the most appropriate means for overcoming him, he just needed to make her trust him.
There is a disagreeable look in your eyes, Barusu.
But when Subaru fell silent, Ram murmured as the temperature of her cruel gaze dipping.
I do not know what you have seen on the way. No, what you saw in the tomb, but it is unlikely to have been anything good. Compared to the gaze that clearly sees someone else when you look at me, this is far viler.
Quit it with the weird suspicions. All I did in the tomb was sleep. The dream I had wasn't all that bad.
The dream, his passing encounter with the white-haired witch, Echidna, floated up into the back of his mind. Having conversed with Echidna 3 times already, he wouldn't say he knew everything there was to know about the witch, but her existence was a very big deal so far as Subaru was concerned. Amid those precious few opportunities, his mind had been saved. He had obtained the strength to move forward, and she had even saved his life. She was someone he could reveal return by death to, someone he could speak to about it. That alone was unspeakably precious. For a time, Subaru's black eyes and Ram's pink eyes stared at each other. He almost felt like she was reproaching him for having been saved by a witch, but Subaru denied that with his gaze. It was not clear whether his intent had been properly communicated, but Ram abruptly averted her eyes.
I shall draw Garf off. Do whatever wicked deeds you have planned.
Thanks, I'm counting on ya. Sorry, you're not in the wrong. I get that.
As if to paper over the awkward atmosphere, Subaru appended those words and, not waiting for a reply, made his way out of the room. When he left the building, the warm breeze filtering through the sanctuary tickled Subaru's bangs. Smelling the scent of grass mixed in with the nighttime breeze, Subaru's legs slowly took him in the direction of the forest. The settlement's bonfire had already been extinguished, but thanks to the moonlight his footsteps were steady. After walking for a little while, he abruptly heard the sound of finger whistling coming from the direction of the Ryuzu residence.
Don't tell me that's her way of calling Garfield over.
Guessing that it was Ram doing whistling, he pictured Garfield being called over by it in his mind. It made him think that the relationship between them was owner and pet and definitely not that of a man and a woman. Either way, he was grateful for Ram keeping Garfield occupied. At the moment, he had bigger worries and priorities than the relationship. To determine whether it was true, Subaru arrived at a path that was not a path and entered the heart of the forest. Subaru breathed deeply to endure the powerful throbbing pain of the memories. Biting down on his back teeth, thick sweat came onto his brow as he forced open his field of vision, matching the scenery with the memories. He used his arms to part the overgrown vines and branches, advancing into the heart of thick green that even beasts disliked, heading deeper and deeper. The throbbing memories he gained when he was swallowed by Shadow, and his very being had been on the verge of dissolving into the murky water. He saw a ray of hope. Murky water, that was the only thing he could call that situation. When his existence was whisked into the shadow, melting into the darkness, Subaru was merged with the numerous consciousnesses within. These were probably the minds of the victims who had been engulfed by the witch's shadow. Subaru had managed to escape only moments before he would have shared their fate. What followed was fruitlessly losing his life despite fighting his hardest, but Subaru's living or dying was not important. Having touched upon the memories of others held in that shadow's embrace, the fact that he had returned with a part of those thoughts was crucial. From a fragment cut off from the memories, he had deduced he'd been seeing things wrong, coming up with mistaken answers for important questions. This came via the vile practice of mixing with numerous other people. But even so, the return on investment was exceptionally large. After all, he'd managed to come back with a great deal, even if it took one of Subaru's lives to fish it out.
That leaves confirming what those memories say. The details kind of give me the willies, though.
With the scenery around him all the color of green, he just couldn't find the hidden facility inside the forest that was his destination. That hard-to-find white building that Subaru had unwittingly arrived at twice. The first time was when he'd been incarcerated by Garfield. The second time, he'd arrived at the place through a teleport via the crystal's power. Subaru did not know the truth behind the building, but the memories were urging him onward. They kept urging that this was one of the sanctuary's secrets. And believing in this, Subaru continued walking until...
Found you.
In the depths of the forest, Subaru spotted the weathered white structure. He wiped the sweat off his brow. The building, standing quietly amid the deep green, had an air about it that seemed to reject the entry of people. No, it was not people alone whose entry it rejected. It was animals, insects, everything. The proof of this was the strange odor prickling Subaru's nose the instant he spotted the building.
This scent's still going strong too, huh?
Wiping his lips with his sleeve, he didn't think anyone would enter that structure without a very good reason.
But I'm going in. Can't get a tiger's cub without going into a tiger's den and all.
Slowly, carefully, Subaru approached the building's entrance. The stonework building was fairly weathered, but just like the tomb, there seemed to be no need to worry about it collapsing. Seeing that there was no door, leaving him free to enter and exit through the entrance, he confirmed that there was no sign of human presence as he began his infiltration. It was fairly dark inside the building, but moonlight filtered in through cracks in the ceiling. Relying upon this to ensure he could still see, Subaru scrupulously inspected the floor and walls as he headed deeper inside. Subaru had been to that place twice before, once through confinement and once through teleportation, but neither occasion permitted him any leeway to scrutinize the structure, so he put studying the place on the back burner. He had come to regret putting many things on the back burner in that fashion. This, too, he now had cause to mourn, but
This cavity in the wall, this is from the memory. Gee?
sparks scattered across the backs of Subaru's eyelids, his eyes becoming teary as he became certain that this and the memories matched together. As he looked around the facility, there was a room in the farthest reaches that was twice as large as any along the way. This was the room in which Subaru had been held during his captivity. The back wall of the room maintained an unnatural whiteness, as if it had been bleached, and it was here he discovered a strange cavity. The cavity had clearly been purposefully created, and when he timidly peered closer, Subaru thought it looked like a place where you'd hide something. No, he did not think it. The memories knew. This was where the crystal had been placed.
Place, but why?
He took out of his pocket the blue crystal that Frederica had possessed. Having been teleported by it twice over, Subaru handled the stone with great care as he placed it within the cavity. Maybe something will happen, or maybe nothing will happen. But the instant after he had the thought, the instant the crystal left his hand, light gushed from it. The dazzling blue made Subaru's breath catch as he instantly shielded his face with his arm. Then he slowly squinted toward the light and...
Oh, come on!
He unwittingly let his voice trickle out. The blue light generated from the center of the cavity gradually waned. In the place the light vanished from was... No, rather, the issue was what wasn't, the white wall that ought to have been there. The wall with the cavity vanished, and so came to be an entrance to another room hidden behind it. Then, when Subaru looked at what was in the hidden room, he was at a loss for words. At the center of the room was enshrined a huge crystal large enough to just wrap his arms around it. On the inside of the beautiful blue light was a curled-up girl, her body sealed inside the crystal.
This is...
Wobbly, Subaru entered the room with a precarious gait, drawing nearer to the crystal. The sight stole his eyes away. Such was the extent of the surreal beauty before him. The blue, transparent crystal put on display a girl so beautiful it was tragic. The impression given was near to that of a block of ice. But unlike ice, which could be melted to free someone from it, the crystal was eternal so long as it remained unbroken. And breaking the crystal would be the same thing as breaking the girl's life. It was a cruel work of art, with the crystal girl as the centerpiece, and her face was familiar to him.
Ryuzu, is that you?
The person inside the crystal had long pink hair. The still young physique was clad in a simple one-piece dress. Her body was curled up like someone sitting with folded legs in phys ed class, and the girl's long gillash-bearing eyes were closed as if she was asleep. This was, without any doubt, Ryuzu Bilma, the representative of the sanctuary. Or more precisely, he ought to have called her a girl who was Ryuzu's spitting image.
It's not just the crystal. What's with the whole atmosphere of this room?
The metallic pedestal supporting the crystal gave off a faint light, granting dim lighting to the entirety of the room. Subaru's eyes, then accustomed to darkness, found the light sufficient to survey the entire layout of the room. The impression the scene gave Subaru was that of a bizarre experimental facility. Of course, this was a world far removed from mechanical technology. That place was no exception, and he could see no extravagant devices within it. And yet, Subaru had, without doubt, received the impression it was an experimental facility. Perhaps that impression had come not from Subaru, but through the memories within him.
And the answer was likely something you only get from coming here. That's the sense I get. Close enough?
I wonder. I am not confident I have the answers you seek, Young-soo.
That excuse stopped working the second you showed up here, I gotta say.
Turning around, he offered a strained smile to the figure that spoke after appearing at the entrance. The familiar face seemed tired somehow as it pleasantly returned the smile. And moreover, there were two of them. The one with the staff with whom Subaru had exchanged words was Ryuzu Bilma. And the other one was...
This is the girl who guided me after the teleportation?
Without replying to Subaru, the girl looking exactly like Ryuzu maintained an expressionless silence. Unlike Ryuzu, she did not have a cane, and the simple poncho-style robe matched up with the girl who'd guided Subaru to the tomb. However, that did not mean it was the same girl for certain. As if to underline Subaru's guess, Ryuzu shook her head.
Probably not. This girl is one of those who stand watch over this place. The one who you met in the forest, Young-soo, was no more than one part of the sanctuary's eyes.
The sanctuary's eyes, huh? It sounds like some kind of surveillance net. So a group of multiple Ryuzis keeps watch in the forest. No wonder you know everything that goes on around here.
Subaru's words, spoken with complete confidence, caused Ryuzu to slightly raise her eyebrows, whereupon she nodded. The eyes of the sanctuary. Subaru now had an answer for the question about that metaphor he'd carried over from a previous time around. It was 2 runs prior. Having escaped his confinement at that facility, just how had Garfield seen through the plan to escape the sanctuary? The plot hatched by Ram and Otto. The answer to that question was the sanctuary surveillance net employing multiple Ryuzis.
I had never thought Young-soo would uncover this place a mere half a day after arrival. I have lived here many years, but I have rarely been surprised so.
The credit doesn't go to just me, it's thanks to the memories that brought me here.
Memories? A strange answer indeed. Just whose memories were they?
I wonder. I think they're probably from someone who knows about this place.
Ryuzu skeptically furrowed her brows, but Subaru did not disclose the secret of the memories. This was not maliciousness on his part, but because he had judged that revealing any more would be dangerous. This information had been gleaned from falling deep into the Witch of Jealousy's shadow. If he explained where he'd gotten them from, the odds of breaking the witch's taboo were rather high. Accordingly, he chose to not tell Ryuzu anything else. But what had developed from that, namely Subaru acting based on his belief in those memories, was another matter. He believed that by going there and asserting these memories, he would draw closer to Ryuzu's secret.
And in point of fact, I turned out to be the bait drawing Ryuzu out. Wasn't far-fetched or reckless at all, was it?
It was certainly a gamble for you. Did you think about what young Gar might do if he spotted you?
I did think about it, so I asked Ram to keep him occupied. In the meantime, it's a date between you and me, Ryuzu.
I am unsure what it is you mean by date, but I cannot defy you at this point, young Sue. You may do with me and the girl here as you wish.
That's giving in a little too much. In the first place, I just want to ask you some things. If possible, I'd like to ask you for your cooperation afterward, but
This was hardly his first choice, but if push came to shove, it was entirely possible that he would have to confront Garfield. As a matter of fact, he didn't know for sure that Ryuzu agreed with all of Garfield's positions. Subaru needed to think of inflated hopes or easy trust as dangerous things.
There is no need for concern. It is as I said. I cannot defy your words, young Sue.
However, in the face of Subaru's concerns, Ryuzu repeated herself as if trying to remind him of something. The weight of those words left Subaru downright perplexed. Ryuzu wore a thin, pleasant smile that confused Subaru as she glanced at the girl standing right beside her who bore the same face as she did. Then she picked up from where she had left off.
We cannot defy the apostles of greed. This is the pact that has been imposed upon us. The replicas of Ryuzu Meyer.
Somehow, resignation seemed to cross her powerless smile as she spoke. They exited the facility and led Subaru to a single house in a place that was isolated even by sanctuary standards. They could not simply return to the settlement, and Subaru was reluctant to hold a conversation in a place with such a caustic odor, so this suited him just fine. It seemed a little too good to be true, but
Such a deeply suspicious child. With that personality, you will die of mental fatigue at a young age.
that's unexpectedly unfunny, and sometimes things get to you whether your suspicions are deep or shallow.
when Subaru was looking around the room in dead seriousness, Ryuzu gave off a sigh with the air of a strained smile. Then she set her cane aside, picking up a pot for pouring tea in its place.
Sit somewhere suitable. I will pour the tea.
I know how to pour tea at least. Ram taught me, so I'm a bit confident in my skill.
A great part of me would be grateful for that, but now is simply not the time, is it?
With the smiling, eyes narrowed Ryuzu watching him. Subaru sat down on a bed, and the Ryuzu look-alike girl grasped Subaru's tracksuit, as if trying not to let him escape. Subaru was at a loss as to what to call the girl who Ryuzu herself had called a replica, until finally,
She's really clingier. No, that can't be it. Pico doesn't plan on letting me escape. I take it?
Get names aside, she bears no ill will. Apostles must be welcomed with special favor. I assure you she will not mind if you give her a little slap for being naughty.
Calling it naughty makes it sound a lot less like a bold confrontation, you know?
Ryuzu's elderly advice brought a look of dissatisfaction from Subaru. With Subaru like that, Ryuzu handed him a steaming cup, then proceeded to sit in a chair and turn to face him.
It is hot tea. 'Tis it not best to blow on it first?
I'm not a little kid, so I'm not gonna bring it to my mouth all nervous and give myself a big burn, okay?
There is a restless one close to me with a cat's tongue, so I am in the habit of giving warnings.
From the teasing way she said it, the one with the cattiest tongue, least able to take the heat, had to be Garfield. Bringing the poured tea to his lips and finding it fairly hot, just as Ryuzu had said, he wet his dry lips and took a breath. When he thought about it, this was the first moisture he had received since his return from death. In other words, since awakening in the tomb. His throat was craving that moisture beyond what he'd expected, and so Subaru promptly drank the cup dry, audibly placing the cup on the table as he spoke.
There we go. I know this is right after an unsettling conversation, but can we get to the point?
How impatient of you. But I have no reason to refuse or the personality to do so. Do as you please.
You being cooperative is a big help, and I take it that this apostle of greed is kind of the reason you're so cooperative?
As they began the Q&A session, Subaru efficiently cut straight to the most recent question on his mind. It was the first time he was hearing the term, but it was the sort of thing that required little in the way of imagination after hearing it. After all, there was just too strong a whiff of a connection to the Witch of Greed. The question made Ryuzu close her eyes and sink into thought. By no means was she rejecting his first request of the conversation. It was just that the silent girl was displaying a quite gloomy expression. Finally, Ryuzu let out a sigh that sounded far older than suited her appearance, as she said,
Young Su, surely you know whose hands first established this land.
Whose hands? That'd be Rosewall's family. No, it wouldn't.
Answering reflexively, Subaru shook his head midway, realizing his answer was wrong. The sanctuary had purportedly been administered to by the Rosewall family for generation after generation, and the current Rosewall had inherited that role. However, it sounded like the administrator and the creator were two separate parties.
Meaning the one who built this place was the Witch of Greed, Echidna.
Yes, a certain witch built upon this soil a place to accomplish a certain witch's purpose. It is a testing ground to fulfill a dream traced by that certain witch.
Testing ground, Garfield said something pretty close to that.
Garfield had made the statement when Subaru and the others arrived at the settlement in the sanctuary. He had called this deadlocked testing ground, the tomb of the Witch of Greed. At the time, the word witch had seemed most important, so he'd let the testing ground part slide, but now that he had seen the girl in the crystal, the impression given by that facility made him unable to forget those words any longer.
If this is the Witch of Echidna's testing ground, what kind of test is she running?
The details of the test, you ask? Where that is concerned, the examples of success are right before you, young Su.
The corners of Rizu's lips twisted as she spread both arms out in a theatrical gesture. Her behavior made Subaru's breath catch. When he guessed the true meaning of her words, he sent his gaze toward Ryuzu and Pico.
So Ryuzu and this girl are the results of the experiment being conducted here.
There was a girl who looked exactly like me, shut inside the crystal. Yes.
Yeah, your spitting image, Ryuzu, are you, Pico, and her triplets of some kind?
If you wish to treat those with the same faces as sisters, 3 is a number that is just a little insufficient.
Just a little, huh?
Just a little. Yes.
By joking around just a little, Ryuzu delicately evaded the truth. But Subaru already knew what Ryuzu was trying to gloss over, that there were over 20 replicas. That said, there was nothing to be gained from pointing that out. The important things were the fine details about the relationship between that facility and the replicas and the experiment being conducted in the sanctuary.
That crystal, or a magic crystal rather, that girl inside of it, what's her relationship to you, Ryuzu?
Switching his wording from crystal to magic crystal, Subaru unhesitatingly cut to the heart of the matter. Receiving his question, Ryuzu shifted her gaze toward the wordless girl.
The answer to that question is not an issue for me alone. This girl and I stand in identical positions.
The girl and the magic crystal included, right?
No, that girl alone is different. That girl alone is the exception. For that girl alone is the real one.
Having been told this yet being unable to digest the contents, Subaru skeptically knit his brows.
Real one? What do you mean by real one, Fuzz?
Now, do not be hasty. An elder's tale is constructed by sifting through old memories. One must be prepared to come along for the ride.
I've come this far, so can you stop appealing to your age, which aside from tone of voice doesn't show at all? I've got tasteless, odorless Pico right beside me already, so if there's nothing but that old granny scent for seasoning, I'm gonna split in two right here.
This has given rise to a rather unfortunate misunderstanding. To me, everything I have constructed about myself is precious, for that is how I gained my individuality.
Gained your individuality?
Having heard the turn of phrase, he repeated it, unable to simply let it go. Subaru desperately tried to make his brain digest it, but Ryuzu, paying no heed to his mental anguish, added, "That's right," before continuing her tale.
Tasteless and odorless, it is as you say. Young Su, that girl is empty on the inside, and I began the same. The me that you see today is no more than the contents poured into an empty vessel over the course of long months and years.
Wait. This conversation's developing really fast. Created? Still empty? We skipped over something really important there. Saying the girl in the magic crystal is the real one isn't enough of an explanation.
The girl within the magic crystal is the original, the first Ryu Zumayer.
Subaru drew in his breath when that name was stated. Ryuzu greeted his hesitation with a single nod and said,
That is the real Ryuzu. All other Ryuzus, me included, are replicas of Ryuzu Meyer, which would make us imitations.
Thus did Ryuzu declare that she, like the others, was a duplicate. Subaru had no immediate follow-up to that explanation. Her explanation just then matched up with the vague theory Subaru had inside of him from having seen many Ryuzus for himself. The reason he diverted his eyes from that theory was none other than Subaru not wanting to believe it. The prejudice in his mind came from physiological disgust toward the fact that an acquaintance of his was a clone.
Does knowing I am an imitation change how you see me?
Dunno. I want to say it doesn't. I really do, especially when the person concerned asks that right in front of me.
Since he was in a different world than his own, it was not appropriate for him to call Ryuzu a clone. The way she had been born was probably fundamentally different from Subaru's imagination. Besides, even if it was a fact she was a replica, all life was equal. It had to be equal. Yes, even though he understood it in his head.
I don't have any confidence I could nod and say that with a chill look on my face, so I'm not going to say those words lightly.
You are kind, Young-Soo. That is also being soft, naive, excessively honest to the core.
He'd been absolutely certain it was not an answer that would leave her pleased. But Ryuzu nodded, apparently satisfied with Subaru's reply. The gesture tugged at Subaru's thoughts, and he came to stare at the girl sitting right beside him. The girl he dubbed Pico as a matter of convenience gazed at the room with emotionless eyes. She continued to keep hold of Subaru's sleeve, almost looking like a doll, even though it was impossible for a doll to have her physical warmth.
That you feel something like physical warmth is no more than a function of a false body.
A false body would Daya mean? False? I can touch it and everything.
Producing a vessel of flesh from nothing is no easy thing. Can you even imagine the principles by which the girl and I are able to exist like this, Young-Soo?
She said it like she was testing him. Subaru restrained his mind's craving for an immediate answer and sank into thought. With Ryuzu taking such an earnest posture, he wanted his own demeanor to be in kind. For that sake, he brought all mental hands on deck.
Could it be mana? So, making a body like that of a spirit?
Abruptly, the existence of a little kitty great spirit quite familiar to him broached that possibility in his mind. Normally, Puck was inside a crystal. When he materialized, he formed a physical body out of mana. Was it not possible that a physical body, a false body that held warmth, might follow along the same lines? Ryuzu responded to Subaru's idea by clapping her hands, acting quite impressed.
Well done. You did well to think of that, even though no one told you the answer.
That's because you gave me a hint that led me to the answer. All I did after that was realize from a spirit that's close from time to time, so should I take that as meaning I'm right?
It is very close to the mark. Our physical replica bodies are created by a ritual using artificial Odo at its core. Enshrouding mana around this core materializes these bodies into being.
Odo, that was the power in the body, as distinct from the mana that floats in the atmosphere, wasn't it?
Odo rests within all that lives. Accordingly, it is even said that Odo is proof of the soul.
The mismatched gravity with which the young voice spoke the words made Subaru unwittingly draw in his breath. If Odo was proof of the soul, then using a ritual to create it was surely...
This is kind of putting it lightly, but ain't that creating life?
Of course, rather special conditions must be in order to make such a phenomenon possible. Unfortunately, I was unable to comprehend the details. You may simply think of the formula's creation as the result of a witch's quest and the result obtained via experimentation.
This is pretty far out stuff. She was really something, huh?
Becoming the creator of life was a feat that rivaled God himself. Setting aside the pros and cons of accomplishing the feat, it was surely worth praising the talent behind bringing it into fruition. Yes, the talent itself was praiseworthy. However, the impression that the feat of creating life was violating a sacred taboo was another matter entirely.
I wonder what she did an experiment like that for. I suppose that's the next topic for discussion.
Hmm?
Put bluntly, magic's totally out of my expertise. I can't even begin to understand how incredible what Echidna did is. Even so, I can tell it's really something else.
As Ryuzu folded her arms, adopting the posture of the listener, Subaru continued his words.
Where'd the motivation come from to do something that incredible? What brought it on? Why did Echidna make the replicas of Ryuzu, of Raizu Meyer?
As Mysteries of the Sanctuary went, the girl named Ryuzu Meyer stood in the number 1 spot. The Ryuzu Bilma before his eyes called herself the Sanctuary's current representative. Her family name differed from that of the original. From the conversation to date, he could tell that she had arrived at that position over the course of a prolonged period of time. In that case, where Ryuzu Meyer's relationship to the witch was concerned.
I thought I'd float a possibility that came to mind.
Oh ho, do tell.
This is the time-honored way these stories tend to go. My theory is for some reason the girl named Ryuzu Meyer lost her life, and she tried to resurrect the girl in the form of replicas.
The eternal search for how to bring back a life that had been lost, realistic or not, was a difficult issue. There were all kinds of ideas proposed to deal with that difficult issue, including reproducing the dead via clone technology, which led to constructing substitutes in their place. And in the vast majority of these fictional circumstances, this was greeted by numerous failures along the lines of, even if you bring the physical body back, you cannot bring back the soul.
Given what you said, Ryuzu and the state of Pico here, the possibility this experiment ended in the same kind of failure seems pretty high. It feels like even if the appearance is completely the same, you can't reproduce what's on the inside.
If Echidna stubbornly kept creating more replicas without giving up, that was truly an act of madness. Even after over 20 failures, had she continued hoping for the possibility the soul might be resurrected. But the one thing Subaru couldn't do was dismiss that as mere obsession. He absolutely could not think of struggling for someone to be brought back to life as wrong. Not Subaru, racing in search of an optimal future that very moment.
Although I think you and the others are probably qualified to blame her, Ryuzu.
And say, we did not ask to be created like this. I have lived a little too long to make such a naive plea. Besides, it seems you have an over-idealized view of the witch, young Sue.
Over-idealized view of the witch?
Subaru's eyes went wide, as if he'd never expected that to be said to him. To that Subaru, Ryuzu said, it is as if you were watching a dream, forming a smile that gave off a rather desolate air as she gently shook her head.
I take it, you were thinking along the lines of, if the witch went to the extreme of such experiments to bring Ryuzu Meyer back to life, the girl must have been an irreplaceable being from the perspective of the witch?
Well, yeah. I mean, is there any other answer?
In point of fact, no other answer came to mind. The witch had tried to bring the girl back to the point of drawing up a ritual to create a soul. So the girl must have been that important to her. What other answer was there?
Ryuzu Meyer was a mere village girl. The circumstances of her birth were just a little special, but she was certainly not close to the witch, nor were they related by blood. Ryuzu Meyer and the witch were such strangers that the times they had spoken could no doubt have been counted on one hand. Incidentally, young Sue, earlier you deduced that the experiment in this land had failed, yes?
Subaru was perplexed at how she had put the current discussion on hold and had gone back to a matter from a little earlier, but Subaru being thrown off did not make Ryuzu hesitate to land an additional blow.
The experiment in this land failed not. I told you before, I am an example of its success.
Ryuzu, you're an example of success? No, wait, something's weird about that.
Overwhelmed, Subaru thrust a palm out and second guessed what had just been said. Ryuzu's wording was strange. After all, had she not explained previously?
You said you were born empty. I know you said you were born the same as Pico is now, and you came to be as you are now. How does that make you a success?
My. Having that said to my face is rather hurtful, you know?
Please don't make light of it. I'm seriously asking this.
He accepted that his statement was inconsiderate, but it wasn't a situation where he could tread lightly. The force of Subaru's words brought a rather strained smile from Ryuzu. She gently touched a hand to her chest. According to the explanation to that point, there was no heart beating behind her diminutive chest. However, Pico conveyed warmth to him as she sat by his side. Where was that heat coming from? He wondered. This was the proof of the soul, the result created by Echidna's experiment to create life.
That girl and I, born empty, are successes of the witch's experiment. Those words are no lie.
As Ryuzu repeated her earlier words, Subaru calmed down his quickened heart and nodded. Ryuzu was saying that they're being born as dolls in an empty state and not as reproductions of the original Ryuzu Meyer. This was by the witch's intent. What was the meaning behind this?
Back then, the girls leaping at the witch were all the same as Pico. Obeying Garfield's commands, the replicas had sacrificed themselves against the witch, enshrouded by a vast shadow without the slightest fear. They'd been made that way like dolls, merely obeying the commands issued to them. Was that what that white-haired witch wanted? Was that what she was after? You could pass it off as curiosity to that point, but what could she learn from that? If she wanted that, brainwashing someone appropriate would have been a hell of a lot faster. Don't tell me the motivation was madness of some sort, like I thought of making them, so I did. And if it was so, that would be that. But for some reason, he was certain that it was not. Why would Echidna make something from nothing, an empty vessel, something you could pour anything into?
Instantly, he saw it in the far distance, a possibility pieced together from various fragments. It was simply a preposterous thought, the sort that one ought to forget about with a single shake of the head. But once the thought was given life, Subaru's brain grabbed hold of it and would not let go. This was the Witch of Greed, curiosity incarnate. She had a logical objective that lived up to that lofty title. She had a reason for constructing an empty vessel with nothing inside. After all, what is an empty vessel for?
It's obvious. It's for pouring something into it.
If the empty vessel was the completed form, the objective was to fill it. Just what would fill such a vessel? What could possibly be the ambition of someone called a witch? A person who had a bottomless craving for knowledge and wanted to know all there was to learn in the world. What was that something the witch wanted to pour into an empty Ryuzu Meyer?
She'd pour personality, memory, knowledge, in other words, a soul.
The deduction made Subaru feel like his throat had suddenly gone dry. In his place, Ryuzu picked up where Subaru left off. Her blue eyes narrowed. And though the old woman seemed to be peering far into the distance, her gaze rested on her own offshoot standing right at his side. No, this was no offshoot. She shifted her eyes toward the doll that was like her own little sister.
The witch was supposed to pour herself into the body of Ryuzu Meyer. This was, in other words,
One type of immortality.
It was this conclusion that unveiled the truth about the experiment conducted in the sanctuary. Immortality. There were many legends about such a thing stretching from ancient to modern times. From Occident and Orient alike, life reaching that point formed an ideal. For eternity, one would never grow old or wither, and the self would be tied to the world without passing through the great cycle of death and reincarnation. Even knowing that this violated the defining rules of life, there was much that was attractive about arriving at the pinnacle of living. Yet an exceedingly decrepit ring of truth rested behind those grandiose words.
Immortality. That's a greedy thought even for a witch. Immortality. It comes off as the goal of a small person obsessed with her own life. I've got to say,
whether being reluctant to part with life is a sign of poor character is open to personal interpretation, but at the very least, the witch does not seem to regard her own life as a trivial thing. Fear of death is natural, as is searching for a way to keep it at bay. In most circumstances, it is the sort of desire one might laugh off, but
Echidna was someone who had the ability to make it into a reality, and this is the result of that line of thinking?
Looking down at Pico as she sat at his side, Subaru had the annoying sense that he couldn't say anything bad about that. Pico did not react to his gaze either. She simply had a vacant expression, as if simply awaiting his command.
If these girls really are empty, even making them cry like little babies would have been way better.
apparently that was not the witch's desire. What the witch wanted in the end was a vessel. Not one with a personality such as, but one beginning with the minimum intelligence required to obey instructions. To a certain extent, that would also give the witch the option of keeping or discarding the memories of the girl from which they were extracted.
Memory and intelligence were installed and saved within the empty vessel. Those were the easiest words he could use to describe it, but they weren't talking about data. They were talking about a single person's personality, memories, knowledge, a person's soul.
It let her implant her own memories into a new vessel. By doing that, when one body became old, if she kept creating new vessels, that definitely become one form of immortality. But maybe you could call passing down the personality and memory one sure way of conquering death. If you saved a personality like Data, even if one vessel was destroyed due to some mistake, you could be resurrected through installation into a new vessel. You could copy the personality, and you could copy the physical body that was the immortality Echidna had theoretically established. And when he unraveled the method behind the immortality Echidna had aimed for, he realized something. So that's it. So that's how it is.
Young Su?
Suddenly, a sense of acceptance calmed the inside of his chest, and a dry smile came over Subaru. The smile made Ryuzu's brows grimace, but Subaru did not give her any reply. After all, it was meaningless to speak about it. There was no one who could understand what was inside Subaru's chest that moment.
Finally, I get it. I get the reason why you acted all chummy with me.
To the smiling Echidna on the back of his eyelids, Subaru quietly let out what seemed like admiration. Echidna's objective was to prepare multiple replicas to inherit her own life and the personality and knowledge therein. Immortality achieved through transference of the soul. This was, in other words, none other than her method of preparing for what came after life.
Just how different is that from my return by death?
From their very first meeting onward, Echidna had harbored a great deal of goodwill towards Subaru. She'd been his confidant, speaking to him at great length, and through the conduct she had displayed, the distance between them had been reduced, and she had obtained his trust. Now he understood the true intent behind those actions. This was the witch's joy, a joy akin to that of discovery.
I understand how you felt at the time. I mean, I was happy enough to cry.
When Subaru had revealed return by death, it had saved him. Truly, he'd looked at the world a different way since. Probably, she'd had the same feeling from the first time she and Subaru had met. That's why Echidna, because he understood that there was no way he could harbor ill will toward her works. If anything, it made him feel closer to her. The emotion Subaru harbored for the witch really was genuine gratitude. Gratitude at having met someone cut from the same cloth. Echidna desired immortality. Subaru continued to pile on death to win his future. The methods did not change that both were engaged in rebellion at the single life that they ought to have had. If that was so, in a true sense was not Echidna the one being who could truly understand where he was coming from, and Echidna, him?
Ryuzu, though, I understand your position and what Echidna was trying to do too. So knowing this, I ask you, did Echidna succeed in her goal?
Her goal, in other words,
She prepared the vessels. All that was left was to overwrite one with her. Did that overwriting succeed? No, if I was to put it more bluntly.
Was Echidna alive somewhere in that world that very moment? He'd cut off his words halfway because he felt like his tongue was going numb. But as if she sensed what was in his thoughts, Ryuzu shook her head. Slowly, she shook her head.
I imagine it is to the chagrin of the witch, but her plan was a failure. Echidna was not passed down.
Why not? Did the personality installa etching fail?
It was not a complete failure. However, from the witch's point of view, her wish was incompletely granted.
Would Daya mean incompletely?
It is a simple matter. If the amount poured is too great for the vessel, of course the rest spills out. If one portion spills out, what remains is already something different from the original.
Blinking at the echo of the word vessel, Subaru looked at Ryuzu, then Pico.
When you say the vessel isn't enough to hold it, you're not talking about physical size, are you?
Perhaps it is better to say, the capacity for the soul. People are suited to the various souls that are inside of them. The vessel of Ryuzu Meyer was simply insufficient to accept the Witch of Greed.
Didn't she know that beforehand somehow?
I cannot know the entirety of a witch's thoughts, but the vessel chosen by the witch Ryuzu Meyer was insufficient for the witch's hopes. As a result, her plans went awry, and a terrible failure came to be born.
Goodness, went Ryuzu, a tired look on her as her shoulders fell. Subaru felt the same way. Echidna had overlooked something in the fine details, an unfathomable error for a witch. Knowing the person concerned, Subaru thought such an error was eminently understandable and predictable, but
So the plan failed, but she still made replicas after that, right?
However, those replicas were born from filling the magic crystal in that facility with a certain level of mana. The witch designed it so that the magic crystal itself forms them.
The magic crystal itself, you mean she made it make the replicas automatically?
As a result, after the witch's death, only the facility remained, and even today the number of replicas continues to grow. It is all a matter of mana, that we require no material resources to live, is the single saving grace.
these words spoken, Ryuzu audibly sipped her tea with the same mouth that had just announced she required neither food nor drink.
You seem to drink tea just fine, though.
This is a hobby of mine. It is an individual quirk I acquired over the course of a long life.
Subaru's listless jab made Ryuzu's little throat ring out with laughter. Feeling a little rescued by that laugh, Subaru let out a long sigh and put a question onto his lips.
So what about this first failed replica? Even if you couldn't stuff the entire soul in, she must have inherited part of a witch's memories, right? Even if it wasn't all the way, she'd still end up pretty witchy, right?
When poured liquid spills, one cannot pick and choose which part spills out. If it is minor memories that spill out, there might be no hindrance to everyday life, but if parts with a crucial impact on personality spill out, it is already beyond salvaging.
Subaru thought Ryuzu's roundabout explanation must apply to the first failed replica. In other words, she became something far from the witch's expectations.
Thanks to that replica having a completely bankrupt personality, yet having inherited a fragment of the power of the Witch of Greed, it was apparently quite the uproar. Though she was disposed of, it caused the Lady Roz of prior generations quite a bit of anguish.
Disposed of, I see.
Of course, if she was one to give up after a single failure, she would not have pursued immortality to begin with. Reflecting upon her failure, the witch's next thought was perhaps the net volume of the soul could be modified.
Takes one hell of a soul to come up with that.
In other words, the idea was nothing short of compressing the data before transfer. Subaru could understand because he had a passing familiarity with computers and the concept of moving amounts of data around. But Echidna was quite something to arrive at the same idea without that knowledge and apply it to the soul at that.
But it sounds like that failed too.
It did not. The witch did not make it in time. The witch of jealousy swallowed her up before she could do so.
After the last of that statement of how the great hope harbored by Echidna the witch had gone to waste, she let out a distinct sigh. Subaru, too, knew how the 6 witches bearing the titles of the other deadly sins had met their end. Already destroyed by the seventh witch, the witches and the false, transient encounters within the Castle of Dreams were nothing more than vestiges of their souls. Or perhaps remaining in soul form alone was simply a matter of Echidna's stubbornness.
So Rosewall's family has been administering the sanctuary since Echidna passed away. Ryuzu, can I assume you live here for the same reason?
It is so where young Roz is concerned, but I live here because I am bound by the pact.
The word pact brought a dramatic rise from Subaru's eyebrows. He didn't have any good memories of that or similar words since arriving in that world. Pact, vow, covenant, the whole bunch. Not noticing the state Subaru was in, Ryuzu made a very deep sigh.
As the replicas go, I was one of the first 4. I was granted the knowledge and personality required to administer the sanctuary as the number of replicas continue to increase. That duty continues even now.
So you were given a personality and a role from the time you were born?
My quirks come from my upbringing after the fact, but it was quite a hardship at first. I had a duty, yet I had no memory. Many years would pass before I could truly appreciate living each and every day.
Somehow, her words had a pained echo to them, no doubt from thinking of the months and years that had passed to date. Only Ryuzu could know the hardship she had faced on the long road she had walked. It had been 4 centuries since Echidna's death. It was a span of time that Subaru couldn't even begin to imagine.
I am grateful for your consideration, but you need not wear that painful look. I believe there is deep meaning behind the duty I fulfill. Their circumstances are varied, but because I was here, I was able to save a great many brethren. Maintaining this place has tangible meaning.
These words spoken, Ryuzu smiled, and Subaru felt pressure inside of his chest. By brethren she had saved, she meant the demi-human people living in the sanctuary had been exposed to bias and discrimination, unable to stay in any one place for long. Whatever the witches' intentions, this had become a place of peace to them, a homeland they had attained at long last. But several days hence, even that land where they could live in peace would be cruelly eaten apart by the fangs of demon beasts.
He had to do something. That was something Subaru and only Subaru could do. For if Subaru didn't do it, a great many lives that he had to save would be lost.
I believe we have finally spoken about all there was to speak of. It became a longer conversation than I had expected.
There just isn't enough time at all to hear about all the hard times you've been through, Ryuzu. Actually, I haven't heard anything about the really important part yet.
As Ryuzu took another sip of her now-cooled tea, Subaru raised a finger. The final question was actually the first, the issue to which the answer had been kicked down the road.
The conversation flew away a little, so I forgot, but can you tell me about this Apostle of Greed business?
That's right. It is something I took so much for granted, I failed to realize.
Please. If I don't understand that, I won't be able to relax because I won't know the reason this girl's acting so fond of me.
Glancing sidelong at Pico, she remained wordless and unreactive from beginning to end, never leaving Subaru's side. And that term, the Apostles of Greed, was the answer.
Answer me, Ryuzu. No need to gloss anything over. Just tell it like it is.
Let me see. Put simply, the Apostles of Greed are the beings who have the right to command us, the replicas of Ryuzu Meyer. As fellow pawns of the witch Echidna, our positions are similar, but your authority places you above us, young Su.
Wait. I can't let that part just slide. Would Dea mean Echidna's pawn?
It is strange that you are unaware of it. The fact that you stand before the magic crystal is proof you have been acknowledged as being qualified to do so.
Cocking her head, Ryuzu looked genuinely mystified. Her reaction left Subaru opening and closing his mouth like a fish. Calming down after several seconds like that, he spoke up again.
Explain it to me from the beginning. I found that place relying on the memories of other people. That's why I can't agree with what you're telling me. I don't have anything to do with the witch, with Echidna.
Fearful of breaking the taboo, Subaru became selective about his words midway through his sentence. The explanation sent Ryuzu sinking into thought, her childish brow creasing as she made an murmur.
And yet, I feel compulsive power from Youngsu's words. This is unshakable proof that you have become an apostle, Youngsu. At the tomb, did you not receive something from the witch that acknowledged you as her apostle?
Something I got from Echidna at the tomb.
Thinking back to his passing encounter with Echidna, he couldn't put his finger on anything that fit the bill. He had no memory whatsoever of words acknowledging him as an apostle, nor of any kind of appointment ceremony. What Subaru was granted in that dream was a fair bit of knowledge and reassuring and terrifying experiences. And
Wait, don't tell me it was the donut tea?
Donut tea?
Twice the witch made me drink what she said were her body fluids disguised as tea.
So you took a portion of the witch into you, then? Without humor or irony? 'Tis surely that.
Why that little? She really did make me drink one hell of a thing.
as the indignant Subaru unwittingly rose to his feet, Ryuzu went, "Now, now," as she chided him. While Subaru's heart and head filled with anger, she smiled at him.
When all is said and done, it's thanks to that you've come this far. It's not all bad, yes.
I'm upset that she set me up and kept quiet about it. What does she think someone's body is? My relations with witches are complicated as it is, and now I've got greed and jealousy all over me.
First was the Witch of Jealousy, granting Subaru the power of return by death without asking. Then there was the Witch of Greed, arbitrarily adding him to the ranks of her apostles. Witches really did do things as they damn well pleased. The instant he also thought of wrath, pride, and gluttony, he was assailed by resignation.
I mean, I knew that witches do as they please. I can't really expect much from the last two either.
At any rate, young Su, you have gained command over the sanctuary's replicas of Ryuzumeyer. You may make even me obey any order you please. Quite thrilling for a healthy young man, is it not?
I might be a grown young man, but you don't exactly look like a grown young woman.
Those with particular tastes might drool at such an opportunity, but it was a treasure wasted on Subaru. Still, when it came to taking advantage of it, this treasure was certainly a useful one for fulfilling Subaru's objective.
If I have the mark of an apostle with command rights, there's an apostle of greed besides me here in the sanctuary, right?
The question made Ryuzu fall silent. However, her expression told him what wanted to know. More than anything, Subaru had already seen the answer with his very own eyes. The apostle who had given orders to over 20 Ryuzu replicas, employing them in the battle against the witch.
Garfield. He has to have qualifications as an apostle of greed, too. And if my guess is right, qualifications to be an apostle aren't something you get unless you meet with Echidna.
And with the witch having already passed away, that world had only one remaining way to meet her.
Garfield's been inside the tomb. He's taken the trial, Ryuzu. You said yourself that anyone can take it. That's gotta be why he's an apostle.
It wasn't difficult to imagine Garfield challenging the tomb. He'd probably raced recklessly into the tomb, full of confidence and spirits high, hoping to liberate the sanctuary. And there, Garfield had no doubt faced his own past. Subaru didn't know what Garfield thought of the results. But given the fact that the sanctuary's barrier had not been lifted, Garfield's challenge of the trial must have ended in failure. And yet, he had become an apostle. After taking the trial, he must have been invited into the Castle of Dreams. There he engaged in conversation with Echidna, and then they must have formed some kind of pact. Exactly what kind of pact had been exchanged between them? Reasoning by analogy, Garfield's objectives all fit the role of a guardian of the sanctuary. That was the only point on which there had been no inconsistency between all the runs Subaru had been through so far. However, once that was removed from the picture, inconsistencies in his words and deeds had appeared between each attempt. Perhaps, for whatever reason, Garfield's actions had begun to go haywire. Did that have something to do with him being an apostle? No, that was overthinking it.
He couldn't get overly sympathetic for Garfield. He didn't have the leeway for that. Garfield, is my enemy. It's better that way. Ryuzu, are command rights broadcasted to other apostles?
There is no outward sign of it, so no. We might feel the compulsive power ourselves, but surely young Gar would feel nothing of that. Nor do I intend to go out of my way to tell him of it.
Then let me bind you on that one thing. Even if Garfield asks, don't answer him.
Subaru's command made Ryuzu narrow her eyes. He felt an odd throbbing in his chest. Belatedly, he realized that this was a sense of guilt, of having ignored the will of another being and his aversion to forcing another to obey him. It wasn't something he wanted to get used to, but this one time, he ignored those feelings.
I can't tell you all the details, but this is the best road for everyone to travel. Ryuzu, my relationship to you girls is secret. Pico and the others can just do the same things they have always done to make sure Garfield doesn't know there's anything between us.
After all, young Gar would not be silent if he knew that our relationship was one of adulterer and harem.
On top of being one evil metaphor, that makes my sin sound way too dark.
Be it sarcasm or complaint, Ryuzu's reply left Subaru drained of energy as he gravely accepted it. Don't forget, remember this. Even if you get a pardon, even if this becomes a lost world, the crimes committed by Subaru Natsuki had to be remembered, even if by Subaru Natsuki alone.
Young Su?
Nah, this is a really huge help. For the moment, I'm good for everything I wanted to ask. I figure I'll be asking for your cooperation from here on out, so counting on you for when that time comes.
Of course, for I cannot defy you. Use me as you please. Be it to evade young Gar or as your own personal hugging pillow.
And can you stop treating me like my demands aren't greedy enough? I'm really not used to it.
Responding to Ryuzu's teasing, Subaru proceeded to give a command to Pico at his side. For several seconds, he mulled over what he ought to say, but
Please continue working as the eyes of the sanctuary just like you have to date. I'll call you when I need you.
having received her command, Pico did not nod as she quickly rose up, heading out of the house in a small run. ReZero, Starting Life in Another World by Tappei Nagatsuki, cast its six-tale novel. Please subscribe to our channel.
When I want to talk to you in secret, Rizu, should I just use this hideaway?
Yes, for this is where I am sleeping while I lend my house to young Rose and the others. I am here most of the time between morning and night. A house without a master is slighted if one does not use it once in a while. After all,
When Ryuzu slapped her thighs, Subaru nodded a fair bit and lightly surveyed the room. He'd thought this when they'd first brought him in too, but this really was an average house with no defining characteristics. But if he was to point out one thing that made it stand out from the other house, it would be the two shields on the wall, both spherical and polished a silver color, decorated with images as if to powerfully assert themselves.
they are the toys that young Gar and Frederica played with long ago.
Children playing with shields. Different culture, huh?
Seeing in which direction Subaru's gaze faced, Ryuzu made a pained smile as she spoke. It was hard for Subaru to imagine the sight of kids playing with shields. It was just as difficult to imagine Garfield and Frederica as little kids.
Thank you, Ryuzu. See you later, That wasn't a command, okay?
I will not be quite that much of a tease. Worry not. As representative of the sanctuary, I shall cooperate with you hereafter.
The oddly roundabout phrasing on the occasion of his departure made Subaru tilt his head. But unrelated to that tilting, he waved a hand and headed out of the house. And just before actually leaving, Subaru abruptly looked back.
Come to think of it, Ryuzu, if the original family name is Meyer, why is your family name Bilma? Where'd that come from?
The question made Ryuzu, watching him head off, flash a wry smile. Somehow, that expression was incredibly fleeting smile, like something so fragile that would crumple if you put your finger on it.
The name of Ryuzu is assigned as part of our role. Accordingly, we can only demonstrate our individuality in other places. Hobbies, tastes, and names. Ah, Young Su.
Yeah?
If you do not mind, perhaps you could ask the same question to me again, from tomorrow and thereafter.
Subaru was silent in the face of Ryuzu's request as that fleeting, brittle smile crossed her face. However, it did not take very much time for him to agree to her earnest plea. Parting with Ryuzu, Subaru walked to the settlement in the dead of night. Ahead of him lay the cathedral, the place where the fleeing people of Earlham Village had been given refuge and the place that served as Subaru's sleeping place. Most were simply dozing in a huddle, but the villagers did as they were told without complaint, and that courageous spirit greatly bolstered Subaru's willpower.
Somehow, I've got to get everyone to the village safe and sound.
As Subaru murmured, in the back of his mind, the smiling faces of people familiar to him were dyed with blood in an instant. The sights of them being cruelly slain by claw and fang, that came from a future that might not be long in coming. Be the culprit Garfield or the Great Rabbit, the difference in the form of death offered no salvation.
But if it was just a matter of liberating the villagers from the sanctuary, I have a way. I merely need to ask that they be released on the firm promise that Amelia would undertake the trial. They wouldn't refuse. Besides, if they're here, they might do something reckless again.
On a previous run, the villagers had metaphorically broken their bones to cooperate with Ram and company in aiding me. Then that metaphor became far too literal with the unfolding of a tragedy far worse than the figure of speech could account for. A tragedy that could not be undone. I didn't want to go through that again. And it was something I absolutely could not allow to repeat itself. Accordingly, I planned to have the people of Earlham Village peaceably released from the sanctuary. Getting Roswald to offer such a proposal made it possible. This was an issue I'd already cleared once before. As for what remained, the next problem I needed to deal with was...
Subaru, what are you doing in a place like this?
Wah! Yeah!
Suddenly, Subaru was taken by surprise by a voice calling out to him from out of the blue. He'd been concentrating so hard on his thoughts that he hadn't noticed her presence whatsoever. Subaru's reaction also seemed to surprise the girl who'd called out to him.
That preposterous way of being surprised can really startle someone, you know?
And no one uses the word preposterous anymore.
As the surprised girl, Amelia, pursed her lips in protest, Subaru somehow managed to respond with his usual flippancy.
Goodness, Subaru, that mouth of yours never quits. And to think I was worried.
I didn't do anything that you had to worry about, so it's all right. But since I'm happy that Amelia Tan was thinking about me, I'd like it if you keep me in your thoughts all the time. We could even meet in a dream.
Sorry, I don't really follow.
Quickly recovering emotionally, Subaru entrusted matters to his gilded tongue as he walked closer to Amelia. Unlike when they had parted, Subaru noticed that Amelia, framed by the waning moonlight, was wearing thin, one-piece pajamas. Without exaggeration, she bore an air of mystery like a fairy spotted on a moonlit night. Subaru felt his cheeks growing warmer at the thought.
You look like a fairy there, Amelia Tan.
Ah, you mustn't. You cannot speak badly of people like that. Even I will get upset.
Calling you a fairy was meant to be a compliment, though.
But fairies are a type of evil spirit, right? You can't fool me by calling those words of praise.
Gah. My wooing was foiled by cultural differences.
Amelia, refusing to lend her ears to Subaru's excuses, puffed up her cheeks. After that, she glanced at the downcast Subaru and let out a long, exasperated sigh.
Yes, let us leave the jokes there. Subaru, what were you doing at an hour like this?
That's my line. I told you not to stay up tonight, and here you are on a nighttime stroll. If Puck was here, he'd say your beauty would be going to waste.
That's... I might not actually have an excuse.
By piling a question onto Amelia's own, Subaru hid from her the information he had gleaned that night. She didn't need to know about the circumstances of Ryuzu's birth or about the witch. It would just be an extra burden to bear. But Amelia's nighttime stroll bugged him on a mundane level. His question made her cast her eyes down.
Having you say that to me makes this a little embarrassing. Subaru, but I couldn't sleep at all so I went out for a stroll with the night breeze hitting me. It helped calm me down a little.
really are uneasy about the trial, then?
It's not that. Well, it might be that. But I don't really understand it myself. I thought maybe by walking around I could find out what it was. Really, if only.
Cutting her words off there, Amelia lowered her eyelids, donning a gentle, self-deprecating smile. Even without saying them, Subaru understood the words that lay ahead of where she had cut them off. Amelia probably wanted to say this. Really, if only Puck were here.
I guess I'ma stand into the very end, huh?
Eh?
Nah. Amelia Tan, Amelia, you're doing great. You really want to run from it, and there's nothing wrong with that. I really respect you for not letting that keep you down and standing up to face it.
On her one opportunity to do so, Amelia would continue her challenge, undaunted by the allure of running away. The result might still be unpalatable, but even so, I saw her trying to fulfill her duty with all her might. That was why my words were true. No falseness to them whatsoever. I respected Amelia, Ram, Otto, Petra, the villagers. I thought similarly of Puck, Roswal, Ryuzu, and Frederica. For that sake, I had to overcome the obstacles known as Garfield, Elsa, the Beastmaster, and the Great Rabbit.
Whoa, what's with you all of a sudden? You saying that out of the blue, it's startling.
It's not all of a sudden. I always think that. I'm just taking the time to say it. I wish I could say it in a more romantic way, but I guess you'll have to settle for a moonlit night.
Hearing Subaru's words made Amelia furiously blink her violet eyes. Smiling at the sight, Subaru spread his arms wide as if trying to hug the night sky itself.
I don't know how much strength my words'll have, but I'm saying it 'cause I feel like it. Amelia, you'll be all right. I'm sure you can do it. I'm here for you.
Subaru,
My words might not be much compared to the real deal, but if playing the role helps, great.
He truly did not know how much his words could support her in the stead of what she truly wanted to hear from her family. Even so, Subaru's words made Amelia give the crystal lying against her chest a squeeze.
thank you. That really gave me the courage I need. Really.
So I managed to help Amelia Tangent of a little bit?
Don't say weird things like a little bit, Tyneses. Subaru, you've always been helping me. Even today, I failed. And still you.
But tomorrow, I'll probably be different. You'll make sure of it, right?
In the face of Subaru closing one eye in a wink, Amelia closed her eyes and let out her breath. Then, after Amelia maintained her silence for several seconds, she nodded.
Yeah, I'll do my best. Cheer me on, okay?
You know I will. You know I will.
Subaru responded to Amelia's soft smile by baring his teeth and giving a thumbs up. The response deepened Amelia's smile, and after a little bit of mutual laughter, the pair walked toward the settlement. After a bit of quiet time together, they came to a fork in the road. This was where they would part for that night, Subaru going left to the cathedral, Amelia going right to the Ryuzu residence.
Well, you'd better get some sleep this time, Amelia Tan. Any loss of your beauty is a loss for the world.
That way of talking is a lot like Puck. You too, Subaru. You won't get taller if you keep staying up at night.
I'm at the end of my growth period anyway, so you don't need to worry about that.
With a bitter smile on him, the pair waved as they parted ways then and there. He truly wanted to escort Amelia all the way, but it was unclear just how long Ram's sabotage keeping Garfield tied down would last. Blithely running into Garfield would only be trouble, so with great regret, he abandoned the role of the wolf in gentleman's clothing.
Besides, if I was together with Amelia any further, my resolve would be dulled. Looks like everyone's fast asleep, huh?
Passing along the nighttime path to bring the cathedral in sight, Subaru cautiously stepped inside. The interior of the building had a large hall reminiscent of a place of worship with only candles to illuminate it, and the villagers' sleeping breaths arose from a communal space. Most of those sleeping in the open space were the village's menfolk. The women and children and the elderly were sleeping in rooms too frugal to be properly called bedrooms, but they were the closest thing under the circumstances. Rather than complain about their accommodation, they acted to make the best of it. Subaru greatly admired their ability to do so. I did feel apologetic toward the several traveling merchants wrapped up in similar circumstances. That's why I can't let them treat me as more special than they are, paying consideration to those asleep. I meticulously made my way to the back of the hall. There lay the space kept open for me, which at first the villagers had kindly furnished with not only a rug and a blanket, but also the immense luxury of a pillow. That was something I just could not allow, so I'd firmly refused in favor of sleeping accommodations like everyone else's.
So you're back, Mr. Natsuki? Ew. Ew. Sorry, did I wakey? Doesn't seem like it.
Looking back toward the quiet voice, in the sleeping space immediately beside him was a plump blah. Correction, Otto with a blanket pulled over him. Under the blanket, he was relying on a Ladnite oar's light to read a book.
I was worried that you were so late in returning. I feared you might have carelessly gotten lost in the forest and fallen into distress. Like hell, I would. Wait, don't tell me you were waiting for me to come back. I will not, for I did not. I am merely adjusting the calculations for how much the merchants here with me need to demand from the Marquis for compensation for the loss of business during our time here. Though as it has taken quite a bit more time than I had thought, I was thinking I should finally get some sleep.
As he spoke, Otto closed the book in his hands and returned the luminous ore to its leather pouch. This made the light even more meager, and the expression on his face grew less distinct as well. But even without being able to see his face, Subaru could manage to see through such a clumsy lie regardless.
What are you, an overprotective mother? At least make me out to be the male parent, I actually have no idea what you are referring to.
After trying to gloss things over in various ways, Otto curled up in the blanket and turned his back towards Subaru. Maybe he thought he'd be found out if he said any more. His thinking he hadn't already been found out was kind of pathetic. Sighing at the sight of his back, Subaru lay on the rug of his own sleeping space. Pulling the blanket up to chest level, he felt sleepiness close at hand, contrary to expectations.
I had no intention of sleeping for particularly long. Even so, my body apparently craved sleep more than I had appreciated. Mr. Natsuki, I believe this is very forward of me on various levels, but if anything happens, I am here to listen. This guy says some weird stuff in his sleep. Gives me the creeps. Is that the kind of reply to give to someone worried about you?
Riding his emotions and raising his voice, Otto looked like he was immediately covering his mouth with his own hands. Fortunately, there was no sign of the sleep around them being disrupted by that single blow.
Behave and go to sleep. If the villagers explode because of your jabs, there'll be no stopping it. I was not saying that as a joke. I know already, and that's why I can't tell you.
The latter half alone was a murmur that seemed to vanish inside of his mouth. After that, Otto fell into silence, apparently dissatisfied with Subaru's lack of further words. He soon lost his battle against sleep. Subaru heartily sighed as he sensed that from Otto.
I did not doubt Otto's offer in any way. If I asked, no doubt Otto would cooperate. He really was far too good to other people to be cut out as a merchant. I'd seen that benevolence for his fellow man get him killed. That was why I absolutely wouldn't ask the man for help. I wouldn't have Emilia or Otto or the people of Earlham Village save me. I would wager my own life and save them all.
After several hours of sleep at the cathedral, Subaru was there when daybreak came to greet the sanctuary. Shaking his still sleepy head, Subaru spurred his mind to awaken. Even that short sleep had somewhat softened the fatigue of brain and body. At the very least, he did not need to worry about falling off a dragon in the near future.
Well, in the end, I'm relying on your running technique to help with that part.
This said, Subaru stretched a hand out to his favorite pitch-black land dragon, Patash, standing right beside him. Upon this, their first reunion since the day before, Paplash fondly brought the tip of her nose over to Subaru. Making a little smile at the adorable gesture, he savored the ticklish feeling and stroked her head.
I know I'm waking you up like this, but I'm counting on you to get the job done. It'll be one run all the way to the mansion.
Patlash responded to Subaru's request with a sound from her throat. It sounded to Subaru's ears like, "It can't be helped," leaving him very grateful for the depth of his beloved dragon's fondness. Very early in the morning, Away from prying eyes, Subaru was trying to leave the sanctuary. His objective was to take on affairs at Roswell Manor, for prioritizing that over the tomb was the plan Subaru had decided on that time around. In complete secrecy, his aim was to get a grip on the situation arising at the mansion, develop firm countermeasures, and return. In the present circumstances, I remained far more ignorant of the events set to occur at the mansion than the situation in the sanctuary. I couldn't save anyone like that. Accordingly, I would proceed to the mansion to learn about those things. Besides,
If I know the circumstances, I can rely on Echidna too. Right now, I still don't have enough data to hold a conversation.
I could lament my ignorance and powerlessness after I had acted? I didn't deserve to have such laments yet. My preparations were insufficient for conversing with the witch. But that did not mean I was without hope.
Beatrice isn't part of the witch cult that I know for sure.
This was something Roswell had spoken to me about during the go-around before last. Roswell had declared that the book in Beatrice's hands was an inferior version of what might otherwise be called a book of knowledge. But that book had nothing to do with the witch cult. If Beatrice was unrelated to the cult, she was not my enemy. I could save Beatrice. That, to me, was hope. Of course, there were many unnatural aspects to Beatrice's demeanor toward me. But the biggest issue had been held at bay. For the moment, that was enough.
If there's a way to save Beatrice and then Rem and Petra AD to a Frederica, that clears the mansion side.
Touching the handkerchief wrapped around my wrist, I crisply put my objective into words. If I knew how to deal with the issues at the mansion, I could pour all my efforts into taking on the tomb and liberating the sanctuary. If there were firm ways to take on both sides, I ought to be able to break through even those twin towers of suffering. Just how many times I might have to sacrifice myself for that end was an unknown variable, but
That's the only value I have here.
flicking a finger off his own forehead, Subaru put his own resolve into words, carving them into his chest. This time, his return to the mansion was the morning of the second day, the fastest timing yet. He'd beat out last time's speed record and returned to the mansion, spurring Petra and the others to evacuate. Everything would begin with that. Before he set off, Subaru dealt with his one lingering regret, sliding a letter under the door into the entrance to the Yuzu residence. The contents were addressed to Amelia, expressing on paper his desire that she not worry about him.
Not that this makes any logical sense, since my premise is that I am redoing this world.
This time, I wasn't telling anyone in the sanctuary about my return to the mansion. All I'd done was write that letter, an effort to inform Amelia and those immediately around her. I'd firmly cut down the possibilities of liberating the villagers and taking Ram and Otto with me. This time, I would return to the mansion alone. What I needed to guard against the consequences of that surely had a very simple answer. Leaving the letter behind even so was to guard against unnecessary accidents. If I clouded the reason for my sudden absence, at a minimum I could avoid chaos in the sanctuary. I wanted to avoid an undesirable change occurring to the greatest possible extent, passing it off as my running some kind of errand to the mansion and so forth. That was my ostensible reason, at least. When you ripped that facade away, my real reason was terribly simplistic. I didn't want to make Amelia sad. That was all. Even in a land fated to vanish and a world fated to be erased, I did not want to make Amelia sad. For that reason alone, I left a letter behind. Truly, the best thing would be for me to stay. Her smiling face from the previous night rose into the back of my mind.
Let's go, Pat Slash. Sorry to make you wait.
Shaking his head, Subaru severed himself from lingering regret as he mounted Patlash. When he gripped the reins and spoke to her, Patlash made a little sound, turning her head to the way out of the sanctuary. Her running feet already had the blessing of wind repel deployed around them, so that Subaru felt neither the sway of the land dragon nor the resistance of the wind. At a speed outstripping the wind itself, Patlash raced through the forest at daybreak. Even the lost woods of Cromaldi was all for naught before this all-too-clever land dragon. She continued her sprint with no sign of getting lost in the lost woods. At that rate, they'd get out of the forest in another hour.
Oh, too bad. It's just like the story 01 should be suspicious of Burby's different sweat.
When the voice poured down from overhead, Subaru instantly pulled back the reins. Receiving this command, Patlash kicked up a cloud of dust as she slammed the brakes. With the land dragon standing at a halt, Her wariness toward the figure standing straight before her as one of the guardian Deva Kings was laid bare by her neigh. But if anything, the opponent bared his fangs in amusement at the hostility.
Ha! Ain't you all worked up early in the morning? That land dragon has some serious guts, don't she?
That's because, aside from her tastes in men, Patlash is a completely perfect lady.
Real adorable of her. Unlike your land dragon, you're nothing but a stupid bastard, though.
Ferocious vigor poured out, and from a single step on the ground, Subaru felt as if the forest itself was being shaken. Such was the oppressive feeling that the youth who had shown himself, Garfield, was thrusting in his direction. The prickly sense of oppression made Subaru swallow his saliva as he raised both of his hands up.
There's a misunderstanding between me and you. I think that's something I need to clear up.
Misunderstanding? Like hell there is. You're running away in the middle o' the night with your tail curled between your legs. That's the small of heart for you. 'Cause if it ain't that...
On that note, Garfield audibly clamped his fangs down, a distinct grimace appearing as he said,
Then that just leaves a guy stinking of the witch heading out to do wicked deeds, am I right?
Crinkling his nose, he spat the words out, making his hostility clear. What he had said made Subaru close his eyes for a moment. Then he stroked the agitated Patslash's neck, dismounting so that he would stand at the same eye level as Garfield. He sighed at confirmation that the witch's stench, the miasma clinging to his body, was indeed the cause of Garfield's antagonism toward him. However, he simultaneously felt that something was a little off. Amid that vagueness, Subaru formed words for the purpose of giving that amorphous ill-feeling a tangible form.
Just now, you mentioned the witch stench, but I've had a fair number of people point that out to me before.
Hey, that's so, I don't know about what other people think. It's one hell of a stench, though.
Setting my body odor aside, those people decided based on my actions. It'd be a big help if you did the same. At the very least, you let me go right after I came out of the tomb, right?
Seeing Garfield go silent made the bad feeling that had been bothering Subaru grow more distinct. Simply put, the timing with which Garfield pointed the miasma out was unsettling. Why had he chosen this moment rather than right after he'd come out of the tomb? Of course, it was possible that when he'd noticed Subaru acting away from prying eyes, he'd linked that to his suspicions about the miasma, giving him justification to be hostile.
If that's the case, just say the word, and I'll give you a sincere and honest apology from the bottom of my heart.
When Garfield heard Subaru's question, his mood clearly shifted. At his back, Patslash gave off a slight growl, perhaps the work of a land dragon's acute sense for danger. Even without such instincts, Subaru could tell that Garfield's annoyance was at dangerously high levels.
I asked something inconvenient for you. That's written all over your face, Garfield.
Stop it. Don't annoy me any more than you have.
No can do. This is your reward for getting in my way. If you hadn't shown up, I'd have let it go, but since you did show up, I'm taking the opportunity. Garfield, your face will give me my answer.
Garfield's voice grew quieter. In its place, the ghastliness residing in his expression grew hotter still. Keeping his eye on that, Subaru raised 3 fingers. And then,
I have 3 guesses for what's put you in a sour mood. The first is the miasma, but I have my suspicions about that. If your nose is for real, I can't square it with your actions yesterday.
he started by raising his doubts concerning the miasma. Garfield's cheek twitched slightly.
The second is you spotting me as I ran out this morning. It's true that was wildly suspicious, but that's weird too. Unless you have been tailing me the whole time, it's like you have someone else keeping an eye on me.
His next shot was a bluff since he'd already heard as much from Ryuzu. Garfield's pupils narrowed.
The third and final guess is what links the first and the second together. It's the girl who looks just like Ryuzu that I saw in the forest. That girl. Oof.
With the third assertion, he had clearly succeeded in getting under Garfield's skin, something that became obvious when the world Subaru saw was suddenly flipping upside down when he was only midway through his sentence.
Gah!
The next moment, his back was slammed against something hard, ringing out an anguished groan along with all the air from his lungs. He felt something extremely hard pressing against his back, which turned out to be a fat tree trunk. The palm digging into the center of his abdomen was holding him so far up against the tree that his feet didn't even reach the ground. As Subaru moaned in pain, the culprit, Garfield, glared at him from up close and said,
And where the hell did you see that?
Wadea mean where? Inside, the forest was right there for the seeing.
Ain, no way you could have been there. Stop trying to fool me if you don't want to end up squished flat.
An audible creak accompanied the increase in pressure, causing drool to spill out as Subaru writhed in agony at the churning his internal organs were going through. Twist, as he might, he couldn't even make Garfield's hand twitch.
Don't move a muscle, land dragon. You do, and I'll crush your precious master.
Garfield moved to check Patslash, who was about to make a move to rescue Subaru from his suffering. The land dragon snarled in frustration, lowering her center of gravity, as if waiting for an opening. Upon reflection, these two foul-tempered personalities, one man and one beast, had been at odds ever since their first meeting. This explained why Garfield had been the cause of Patslash's death during a previous run. Of course, neither of the two concerned knew anything about that, and when Subaru thought about it, he felt his agony ease somewhat.
The hell's wrong with you? Why are you smiling at a time like this?
Ori just remembered something made me laugh.
You're off your rocker, damn it.
Who the heck are you?
With a low murmur, Garfield suddenly let Subaru go. Unable to break his fall, Subaru tumbled to the ground, immediately glaring at Garfield as he wondered what the big idea was. And then he realized it. Resting in Garfield's eyes was disgust and a faint trace of fear.
Shadat, madman, this ain't funny. Damn it, you were testing me, weren't ya?
Pressed into silence, Subaru touched a hand to his throat as he let out a light cough. He sensed Patslash rushing right over to his side. During that time, Garfield moved a fair ways back.
You knew you might be killed then and there, damn it. This ain't no joke. How can you smile when your own life is on the line? Ya lost your mind.
When you put it like that, it's kinda hurtful. You know, I'm not exactly calm and composed here.
Smiling weakly at Garfield's statement, Subaru scratched his head. On one level, what he'd said was correct. On another, it was not. Fact was, Subaru's hands were shaking, and his stomach hadn't stopped crying out from convulsion-like pains. Mistaking his demeanor for composure was a considerable misreading. But it was also a fact that he had intentionally provoked Garfield, fully knowing it put his life at risk.
After all, I had to be certain of what drove Garfield to anger, what was making him explode. This was an investigation I had purportedly kicked down the road when I previously decided to prioritize the mansion. But it wasn't a move I would refuse to play if granted a golden opportunity. There was no denying that my life had been in danger as a result, but if my life's payment enough, I'll use it to get the results I want.
If the only sacrifice that needed to be paid was in my heart, I might as well buy something worthwhile with it. If I could cheaply obtain a piece of the puzzle that eventually led to an optimal conclusion, I'd risk my life as many times as it took. No doubt my determination had been conveyed to Garfield. Looking revolted from the bottom of his heart, his teeth groaned as he spat a reply.
I know a bastard who has the same eyes as you do. Me, I hate his guts. Hell, I should crush your head right now while I have the chance.
I think that it'd end up being a problem for both of us. If possible, I'd like you to let me go with a generous heart.
What proof do I have that letting you go here won't be bad for us lat?
I won't betray Amelia. I won't do anything that'll harm the sanctuary either. Believe me.
Brushing dirt off his body, Subaru declared his innocence to Garfield's suspicious heart. This was a gamble. If Garfield suppressed his hesitation and decided to eliminate Subaru then and there, his life could be forfeit at any moment. But from Subaru's point of view, there was still time before that moment arrived. Garfield was unsure what to do. There was no doubt that if Subaru crossed the line, Garfield's fangs would mercilessly fall upon him. But this time, he hadn't crossed that threshold yet. Accordingly, Garfield was at a loss as to whether he should put away his fangs and his claws or not.
So you're letting me go. Fine, if that's how I take this.
Don't get cocky. Get lost before I change my mind.
Lowering his arms, Garfield spat out his decision as he moved to the side, seemingly yielding the path to Subar. His demeanor brought a low growl from Patlash, but Subaru held out a palm to stop her. Some might say that he had both won the gamble and lost. Either way, this time he'd apparently managed not to cross the line with Garfield.
Now that you're letting me go, mind answering my third question from earlier?
I said don't get cocky. Jellugal does not forgive twice, damn it.
That's so. Guess it was too much to ask for then.
That sour reply made Subaru's shoulders sink as he promptly backed off. Subaru proceeded to mount Patlash as Garfield kept regarding him with suspicion.
You don't want to talk. I have no way of forcing you to talk. Betting on tears to sway you has bad odds, so I won't push it this time. I'm saving you for later.
This time? Later? What the hell are you talking, Ab?
Don't act all mystified, Garfield. I know you're hiding something, but I'm going to expose it. That's an absolute certainty, because that's what needs to be done.
Subaru's plain-spoken announcement made Garfield open his eyes wide. His gaze met with Subaru's. However, this time Subaru was not afraid of that sharp stare. The power behind Subaru's and Garfield's eyes, as well as the pair's standpoints, had been reversed. Garfield ought to have been overwhelming with his clear advantage in brute force, but he was being held in check by Subaru's bottomless determination. As if refusing to admit what was happening, Garfield clacked his fangs once more.
Shut up. If I silence you right here, right now, then that absolute certainty goes poof, too.
Sorry, but this won't change. As long as I don't give up, the moment I know someone's hiding a secret, it's not a secret anymore. If you're gonna blame something, blame your carelessness.
Garfield, not knowing the meaning behind the cumulative weight of Subaru's words, was beset by total confusion. He had no way of knowing the meaning of Subaru's choice of the word carelessness because it wasn't him, but another Garfield from a previous time that was responsible. And this was both a future him and a him that already was destined never to arrive. They were looking at different realities. They were seeing different numbers of possibilities. That was what separated them.
Do you still want to try and stop me, Garfield? If you do, all it's going to accomplish is waste time. It'd be helpful if you don't anymore.
If I lost my life at this very moment, I'd have to restart from last night in the tomb. Recreating the exact same conditions to make sure I reach the same point again would be backbreaking work. Not that I couldn't do it.
Damn it, curse you! Why are you here? What are you trying to do to us?
If he didn't plan on stopping them, then Subaru was just about ready to order Patlash to go right around him. Garfield's voice, which sounded pathetic as it echoed through the forest, made Subaru sigh deeply.
I told you my objective is to save Amelia. I don't have any intention of doing harm to the sanctuary. I'm not trying to do anything to you and your people.
Far from hurting anyone, my only goal was but to extend a helping hand. First and foremost, I was thinking of Amelia and company, of course, but it applied to Ryuzu and the residents of the sanctuary, too. I had no qualms about adding Garfield to the list.
In the time before I get there, I'll probably make you hate me a few times more. Let me apologize in advance for that. Really, I'm sorry.
I don't get it. 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 I don't get it.
Garfield rejected everything he could not understand. Subaru was intimately familiar with that behavior. If only I could make him understand somehow, he thought. But he acted the way he did because he didn't think that was possible. When Subaru emitted a sigh heavily laden with resignation, it sparked Garfield's indignation and made him explode.
The hell do you think you are looking down on us? Who the hell asked you to do anything? It's none of you don't know anything about this place, anything about the old hags. You don't know nothing.
I know I don't know. Actually, it's precisely because of that thought that I'm doing this.
Would Dea think you can do just scratching the surface and coming around with nothing but pretty words? Smiling all frivolous, talking only about stuff like it's a dream. Fooling people with words to make 'em comfortable. You're nothing but a charlatan son of a bitch. Someone who ain't known pain and ain't known suffering shouldn't run his mouth like he understands.
Unable to tear down Subaru's knowing face, Garfield remained indignant as he shouted. Garfield's jeer was swallowed up by the far reaches of the daybreak sky. Faced with the distant echo of those blab-like words, Subaru gripped his reins. Paplash changed direction and began to walk. Leaving Garfield behind, Subaru turned his back to the sanctuary to look ahead toward the forest's exterior. Garfield had said Subaru looked down on him, pretending like he knew things, butting into things he didn't understand. Everything Garfield said was true. Subaru was probably wrong about everything. Nonetheless, he would say one thing.
I do know. I know hell. I've already seen it, over and over.
If there was a hell to be found here, then it must have been in many of the worlds I had seen so far. Countless times, when the end of the world arrived, I had seen hell again and again, enough to make me want to avert my gaze. It was burned into my eyes, seared into my body, and forever lodged into my mind.
That was why I said that to Garfield. I said it confidently, hoping to put him at ease. I left behind a smile, so that he might find some courage.
I'm the only one who needs to know what hell is. That's what I'm here for.
When Subaru passed through the gate, slipping through the front courtyard, he looked up at the sun overhead. Its position in the sky was a bit inclined to the west. Based on that, the time seemed to be a little past noon. Roughly half a day since leaving the sanctuary, Subaru emitted a light sigh as he finally arrived before the majestic facade of Roswell Manor. It was a sigh of relief that he'd at least made it safely that far.
Could you not show me such a flabbergasted-looking face?
I am not flabbergasted whatsoever. I am merely surprised at your exceedingly quick return.
Saying this was a tall, golden-haired woman whose jade eyes were open wide. Frederica, coming out to receive the arriving guest, she was beside herself when she noticed it was Subaru in the entryway. From her point of view, he'd returned after only a single day. A virtual somersault. It was natural for her to be surprised. However, to Subaru, his time away had been one of repeated upheaval.
I have a reason for the quick turnaround. It relates to you too.
And so you have returned alone? You did not bring Lady Amelia with you?
You know full well why Amelia can't leave the sanctuary, right? You don't need to put on an act. I think you'll find I've returned a lot better informed than you might assume.
Tension was gripping Frederica, something Subaru intended to relieve as he raised both of his hands. He didn't want to spark any fruitless arguments. His suspicions about Frederica had already been cleared up once before. He believed she was positively uninvolved in both the raid on the mansion and the calamity occurring in the sanctuary. All she had done was give Amelia that Crystal offered several false pieces of information about the barrier and refused to explain who had commanded her to do so. That said, the secret she was keeping close to the chest was one he absolutely had to expose.
Come to think of it, I've sworn to expose the secrets of brother and sister alike. Man, I'm a disagreeable guy.
Are you speaking to yourself? Also, the way you are staring at my breasts, you mustn't?
I won't go so far as to say I'm not interested in them, but that's not what I'm thinking, okay? Anyway, let's...
Huh, Subaru?
When Frederica noticed the inappropriate place he had let his gaze linger, she reacted by hiding her cleavage and squirming away. Right as Subaru started claiming that it was a misunderstanding, a lively, high-pitched voice rang out. He could hear energetic footsteps approaching as a small, adorable girl in a maid outfit, Petra, raced down to the pair.
You came back really fast, didn't you?
Lining up beside Frederica, Petra looked up at Subaru, her eyes sparkling with delight at his return. Her reaction made Subaru cross his arms and turn his eyes toward Frederica.
Hey, see that? This is what a maid's supposed to be like.
Petra is a special case. I am simply not as charming. So cute. Sue, Master Subaru, Miss Frederica, is something wrong?
Petra tilted her head, looking puzzled by the exchange between the pair. Glancing at Frederica, who was enraptured by the adorable sight, Subaru patted his own chest in relief. Petra and Frederica, he was truly glad that he was able to reunite with both of them safe and sound. getting to meet Petra again was making the corners of his eyes particularly hot.
After all, my last memory of Petra was from the height of the tragedy at the mansion when I grieved at seeing her reduced to only an arm.
Master Subaru?
Nah, I was just thinking seeing Petra heals my heart so much. Seeing your face is a serious relief. Come to think of it, Petra, this time around, you're the only one I can talk to without worrying about anything.
As Petra watched with upturned eyes, Subaru flashed a smile and stretched a hand toward her. He proceeded to stroke her reddish-brown hair as if he was combing it, something she happily accepted.
Master Subaru, let us put that envia, that charming cuddling for later. You wanted to speak with me, yes.
Sounded like a bit of your true feelings slipped through for a second there, but not dragging things out is a big help. Is talking in the lounge okay?
I shall be there with tea. Petra, show him in. Yes, Miss Frederica. Master Subaru, this way, please.
Briskly dividing their duties, Frederica headed to the kitchen while Petra pulled Subaru's hand as she guided him along.
The moment I began walking into the mansion, the urge to head to Rem's room instantly sprouted inside of me. However, I suppressed that impulse out of a sense of duty. At that moment, I felt that if I prioritized my desire to meet her, something precious to me would break. For a short while, I would carefully hide Rem deep within the confines of my consciousness. Come to think of it, there's something I have to say to you, Petra.
What is it?
Thank you for the charm, Petra. It saved me. Probably in a different way than you intended, though.
As Petra walked not so much ahead of him than in a more normal side-by-side manner, Subaru showed her the handkerchief wrapped around his right wrist as he conveyed his gratitude. That handkerchief had truly saved him in an unexpected way.
Really? I helped Subaru?
Yeah, it saved my Lee. Well, that's not quite exactly how it saved me, but pretty close.
Ear! I don't really get it, but I'm glad. That makes me really happy.
Easily accepting even Subaru's vague, half-baked reply, Petra's face broke into a brilliant smile, something that brought a great measure of peace to Subaru's mind. Enough to make Subaru firmly swear to his heart that this smiling face was one of the things he had to protect. When Subaru returned to the front entrance, Petra was staring at him with her cheeks sourly puffed up. There was not even a hint of the smiling face that Subaru had vowed to defend just under an hour before. With her red face and wet eyes projecting dissatisfaction with all their might, Subaru felt distinctly ashamed of himself.
Petra, how long are you going to sulk like that? If you keep this up, you'll be causing trouble for Master Subaru, yes? But, Miss Frederica... No buts. You heard what Master Subaru said, and yet, you are being unreasonable as a maid. No, the issue precedes being a maid. You understand, don't you? Huh. Oh, him fillin'. Infillin'.
Chided by Frederica, Petra hung her head in chagrin. He felt sorry for Petra as he watched her get a scolding, but Subaru knew that any intervention would only fan the flames. Though he felt bad about it, this was one point that Subaru could not yield, even if he had to become a demon in the process. In the lounge, Subaru had proposed a plan to the pair based on his experiences from all the failed attempts he had made so far. The contents of that plan were the cause of Petra's sour mood, for he had proposed that.
We shall leave the mansion empty, temporarily concealing ourselves in the village. That is what you require of us.
Yeah, I'm counting on you. Sorry for the unreasonable demands.
It was only just the other day we had the witch cult affair, so if that is your reasoning, then I cannot refute you.
The basis behind Subaru's plan made Frederica sullenly cast her eyes downward. It had only been one short week since the witch cultists under Patelgus's command had mounted an attack on the mansion and the village. The still fresh memories and scars from what they had done were tremendously effective for persuading Petra and Frederica. His goal was to evacuate the pair from the mansion and distance them from Elsa's imminent attack. This was the strategy Subaru had decided on when he returned to the mansion with maximum possible speed. For the sake of persuasiveness, He'd explained that it was a precaution against witch cult remnants rather than assassins. For that reason, they would flee to the village not in maid outfits, but outfits any village girl might wear, so as to conceal their connection to the mansion. To be blunt, Petra notwithstanding, whether Frederica would do as he asked was a real gamble, but,
I cannot shirk this duty. After all, Master Subaru, you are entrusting me with your beloved dragon and a woman most precious to you.
I really didn't mean to bring that up as a way to persuade you. I'm leaving them in your care because I trust you.
My, such killer words. Master Subaru, you are truly skilled at tickling a maid's heart. I think that too.
Petra raised her hands up, hopping as if declaring she was also present, drawing a pained smile from Subaru as he shifted his gaze to his arms, and to the sleeping face of the lovely girl he held within them. Wearing thin blue pajamas over her upper body, it was the girl who continued to sleep without making even the slightest sound. Rem, Subaru had picked her up from the bedroom in which she slumbered, carrying her all the way out of the mansion like that. She was no exception.
Rem, Petra, Patchlash, I'm entrusting them all to you, Frederica. I plan on rendezvousing with you as fast as possible, so...
I hope that you are able to come to terms with Lady Beatrice so that she might join us as well. Truly, I do.
Yeah, me too!
I replied to Frederica as my back teeth bit into my cheek. When would I actually be able to fulfill that vow? Even I did not know if it would be this time around or at some point in the future. But I would most certainly fulfill it. That I swore on my life. Casting that vow into a future with no guarantees, I hoped I could be forgiven for doing the best I could along the way.
Could you cheer up for me, Petra? It's tough to be hated like this.
Moo, in that case, Subaru, you said earlier that I saved you, right?
As Subaru raised the proverbial white flag, the sulking Petra looked like she had suddenly recalled the thanks she had received earlier. When that elicited a nod from Subaru, she held a finger up and said,
Then, in expression of gratitude, please, I'll let you off in exchange for one date.
A date? Where the heck did you hear about? Must be from that time with Amelia, huh? You really have a sharp memory, Petra.
The adorable proposal made Subaru recall his first date with Amelia, his reward after the Demon Beast incident. At the time, they'd gone together from spot to spot around Earlham Village, meaning the villagers and the children had seen them. Apparently, Petra had remembered the word from way back then.
Got it. If that'll do, then consider this escort job accepted. I'm honored to be Petra's first date, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, it's a promise.
Petra's face brightened with the appearance of a beaming smile, her foul mood seemingly forgotten. That face offered nothing short of salvation. Through one girl's sympathy, it felt like even his failures could be swept away.
Well, I'm going to go call Patlash over.
Straightening her back with a spring, Petra energetically raced for the rear of the mansion. She seemed almost too worked up, but her consideration for others was probably a large part of that. The astute girl had probably sensed that Subaru still had more to discuss with Frederica.
Let's make this promise again someday, Petra.
Watching the girl receding in the distance, I whispered those words for my ears alone. This was a world that would likely vanish. The promise they exchanged would not remain within her. However, I would never forget. Also that we could make the same promise again when it was time to choose the correct future.
She is a good girl, isn't she?
Yeah! Let me be the one to brag about her sometime, all right? I'm the one she chose for her first date after all.
After watching Petra head off, only Subaru and Frederica remained. With the exception of Rem, asleep in Subaru's arms, the two were alone, making this the ideal opportunity to speak openly. Surmising what was to come, Frederica's body was slightly stiff as she reoriented herself towards Subaru. And then,
I know you're about to set off and all, but can I ask you Actually, make it 3 questions.
That is incredibly sudden and exceedingly shameless of you. It would depend upon the specifics.
adjusting how he held Rem while he broached the subject, Frederica knitted her brows. There was a twinge of unease that came over her jade eyes. For a time, Subaru mulled over just what he ought to probe at before he finally asked,
I want to ask about Garfield. He's been inside the tomb. Did you know?
Is there something between you and Garfield?
You're the one who warned me to watch out. Harsh words, you know? I know about your relation to Garfield, too. That's why you don't have to cover anything up.
In but a single, really, in half a day, you would seem to have gained a great deal of the Master's trust.
Gazing in wonder at the breadth of Subaru's knowledge, Frederica voiced that conclusion as if speaking to herself. She apparently thought that Subaru had obtained the information from Roswaal, something he made no effort to correct. After all, information nigh impossible to learn in a single day was a weapon Subaru and Subaru alone wielded. Using that as leverage, Subaru wanted to discover Garfield's true intentions, an irreplaceable piece of information for him to devise a way to clear Sanctuary. Given the fact that he had the qualifications to be an apostle, his bias toward the trial, and the slight measure of sympathy he had shown Amelia as she challenged the tomb, there was no mistaking that Garfield bore special feelings toward that tomb. If this was the core component of the differences in his actions from each of Subaru's runs, then that was how he would unravel the thread.
Did you hear anything about me from my little brother?
I don't really want to say this, Frederica, but most of it was bad. Garfield said that you abandoned your birthplace and left. But since it's him, it could just have been his foul way of
No, it is fine. Thank you for your consideration, but I am all right.
Firmly shaking her head, she left Subaru choking on his words, unable to continue. During that time, Frederica narrowed her eyes, averting her gaze almost as if to stare into the distance as she began to explain.
It has been over 10 years since I departed the sanctuary. I have not spoken to my younger, to Garf, once in all that time. The gap has remained unbridged ever since.
Frederica, is it all right if I asked why you left the sanctuary?
He already knew the reason why she was not held captive by the barrier enveloping the sanctuary. The barrier, which bound those who carried mixed human and demi-human blood, did not activate if that mixture was too weak. She was not a half-blood, but a quarter. This was the reason Frederica could leave the sanctuary.
Still, being able to leave and leaving are two different things. I tried asking Garfield what he wanted to do after the barrier was lifted too, but he didn't answer.
I see. I probably wanted to create that for him.
Subaru put on a puzzled look when he heard the vague explanation, one focused around the word that. Not noticing his reaction, Frederica seemed to be trying to coax an answer out of something amorphous that rested deep inside of her.
Someday, the barrier will be lifted. I was absolutely certain of that. Perhaps that was simply wishful thinking on my part. If the barrier was lifted finally, the people living inside the sanctuary would be freed, and they would come outside, having no more idea what to do than Garfield does right now.
So you wanted to create that something for them, Frederica?
Close. It is very much like that. A place for them, perhaps. Something to give courage to those dependent on the sanctuary. A spark for them to step outside.
Frederica seemed satisfied with this explanation as she touched a hand to her chest. Subaru had never seen her act this way, like a bud gently blooming into a flower. The people dependent on the sanctuary were those with nowhere else to go due to irrational ostracism and discrimination. When the barrier was lifted and even the sanctuary was lost to them, where would they go? To answer that question, Frederica had been working toward a new place they could call home. With such conviction roaring inside of her, an earnest light shined in Frederica's jade eyes. Coming back to Subaru's question, as far as the tomb is concerned, she offered as a preamble, before saying,
To the best of my knowledge, Garf entered the tomb only once. If he took the trial, it could only be then. I do not know whether he challenged it again, thereafter.
So what was the result at the time? I imagine that he failed, but
shaking her head, Frederica had a grave look on her face.
At the time, I was unable to rush into the tomb after him. Grandmother simply told me that Garf had not returned, and it was Grandmother who entered the tomb and brought him back.
So Rizu is the one who brought Garfield back, huh?
The natives of the sanctuary could not lift the barrier. Ryuzu had previously told him that she was bound to the place by a pact. For that same Ryuzu to enter the tomb was akin to defying the witch's commands. Considering the circumstances of Ryuzu's birth as a replica, this was truly on par with an act of rebellion against her creator. Small wonder, then, that Garfield revered Ryuzu, who had gone that far to rescue him and thought of the sanctuary as a precious place. But for the result of that trial to be Garfield becoming an apostle of greed, he had to have wanted something.
When she returned, Grandmother kept their trip to the tomb a secret. And ever since, Garf stopped saying he was going to enter the tomb. He'd said he was going to liberate the sanctuary by his own hand and show Grandmother and the others the outside world.
From Frederica's lonely words, I realized a truth that she herself had not. Frederica had departed the sanctuary in order to build a new home in anticipation of the day liberation would come. She was waiting for the time when Garfield would free the people of the sanctuary. Frederica had ventured to the outside world to support the hope her younger brother once embraced, and yet that hope had been dashed midway, and now Garfield took great pains to protect the sanctuary. So that's what it was. This was the true motive behind Garfield's actions. Grieving for a future he could no longer see, he protected the present instead. This explained the apparent contradictions in his actions to date.
Master Subaru, I ask that you somehow take good care of my uncouth younger brother.
Even if you say that to me, there's not much I can do.
As Subaru sank into thought, Frederica bent deeply at the hip as she made her request. Subaru was at a loss for how to respond. But Frederica slowly shook her head side to side and smiled, making no attempts to hide her mouth and leaving her sharp fangs on display. Her beaming face was beautiful enough to captivate him.
Master Subaru, the reason I ask is because I now believe you are up to the task. I will have you know, I have some confidence in my ability to read people.
Frederica's statement, somehow coming off as playful, made Subaru avert his gaze. He wanted to answer her expectations, but could he really say he was prepared to fulfill them this time around? It was because he had no such conviction that Subaru could not bear to meet her gaze and hesitated in his reply.
I humbly ask that you take good care of my younger brother.
Even so, it was the Subaru with whom Frederica spoke once more, repeating her request with a smile still on her face.
Master Subaru, please allow me to take Rem. Your arms must be at their limits.
Yeah, actually, I've really been pushing it. It's not like I can afford to just drop her after all.
Frederica opened her arms, which also signaled the end of the conversation. Indulging in her benevolence, Subaru handed over the sleeping Rem. He had heard once unconscious people were supposed to be far harder to lift than anyone who was awake, but her body didn't feel heavy to him. It was as if having her name and memory stolen away had left her diluted, almost like she was going to fade away. When Frederica's arms embraced Rem, he brushed aside the slumbering girl's hair, burning her face into his eyes, as if this would ensure his hope, his vow they would be reunited, might reach her even as she dreamed.
Have you already thought of a method to find Lady Beatrice?
If there was any time to spare, he'd have spent all of it caressing Rem like that. As if to discard that lingering regret, Frederica asked Subaru, who was staying behind in the mansion, about what his next move would be. How did he plan to find Beatrice, presumably in the archive of forbidden books, even at that very moment, and bring her out with him?
If she really wants to hide, there's no way I'll find her no matter what plan I come up with.
Then what shall you do? It is necessary for Master Subaru to meet with Lady Beatrice after all.
I told you, that's if she really wants to hide.
As Subaru repeated himself, the Fredericas arched in doubt, faced with her questioning gaze. Subaru finally pulled his fingers away from Rem and turned back toward the palatial building. It was a big, overly broad manor. Beatrice had as many hiding places as it had doors. But
there's no one who plays hide and seek who doesn't want to be found. I always find her because she's hiding with the hope that someone will find her.
And it was probably that single loophole that tied Subaru and Beatrice together.
Take care of Rem, Petra, Patlash, and yourself too, okay?
With that, Subaru bid Frederica farewell one last time. In response, Frederica, with Rem still in her arms, bowed respectfully. The instant he touched the doorknob, Subaru wore a pained smile as he had the sense that he grasped correctly. After all, once seeing Frederica and company off, he returned to the mansion, did a few light stretches, and walked off to search for Beatrice. Whereupon the first door he selected was a bingo. If the words he had exchanged with Frederica at the entrance were true, this game of hide-and-seek was rigged. To begin with, the timing of just when she began that game of hide-and-seek would greatly alter how he interpreted this series of events. To find out for certain, Subaru took a breath and twisted the doorknob.
You finally showed up, I suppose?
Alongside that single-phrase greeting came a current of air mixed with the unmistakable musk of old books. That unsociable tone of voice, that grumpy way of speaking hearing that Subaru instinctually released the tension in his shoulders. The worries that hounded him just moments before, the travails he had endured up to that point. For a brief moment, he was able to forget them as he raised a hand in greeting.
Hiya, Bioko. Haven't seen your face in a while, but you haven't changed one bit.
It has only been 3 days, and yet somehow the way your flippant tongue irritates me has not changed at all either.
It was the mistress of the archive of forbidden books and its rows of bookshelves who responded. At the center of the room, surrounded by those old books, a young girl was sitting on a wooden stool with her cheek resting upon her palm. Beatrice. While gazing at her, Subaru abruptly realized that she was always sitting on that stool. The archive had proper desks and tables, and yet she was always there, ready to receive guests. That was how she was when Subaru first met her, and the numerous many times Subaru had visited since.
Could you cease and desist with that unpleasant gaze, I wonder? There is no reason for you to look at Betty with such eyes.
If you're talking about my mean mug, then unfortunately the same one I was born with. I hate to admit that, but I've got no intention of getting a replacement now. Putting that aside, I came here today with a different reason in mind than all the other times before.
Subaru's words heavily implied the reams of information he'd gained about Beatrice during that loop. And it was she herself who had told Subaru that if he wanted to understand, he ought to change places and obtain that knowledge in the sanctuary. In fact, Subaru had learned why Beatrice continued to obsess over the archive of forbidden books and about the magical tome she possessed. He would not claim that he had discovered everything there was to know about her, but it was still enough to be a thread he could follow. Subaru's gaze, imbued with determination, made Beatrice's cheeks stiffen slightly.
In the sanctuary, did you find out? I wonder.
If you're asking just how much I know, that's hard to say. I learned a bit, but definitely not everything. I'm using the power of guesswork to fill in the parts I don't have.
Ears. Then do as you please. It is an ironic idea either way, I suppose.
She let out a sigh, and right after, Beatrice's expression abruptly relaxed. When she took off her mask of obstinacy, what rested beneath was the gentle, charming smile she was born with and a forlorn blue glimmer in her eyes. The sight unwittingly left Subaru at a loss for words. Her fleeting, fragile beauty left him unable to draw in his breath. That charming smile was just too lonely.
The long pact is coming to an end. This time, the end of the end shall come to an end, and Betty can finally be freed from stagnation. Though I must say, fast! For Betty, having you be the one to do it is an exceptionally ironic conclusion, I suppose.
Mesmerized by her words and her charming smile, Subaru blinked hard for a moment to regain his bearings.
Ironic, huh? I guess being able to talk like you know it all is another benefit of your precious book?
Beatrice's charming smile and the annoyance he felt made Subaru a tiny bit aggressive. When he sent a glance her way, Beatrice sighed deeply and sent a hand behind her stool, and from there, pulled out a single tome, a black-bound book of knowledge, and held it against her chest. Such a book of prophecies recorded the possessor's future and guided that possessor to a better path. Beatrice's fingers grasped this book, what Roswell had described as falling somewhere short of a truly complete product. Indeed, the girl had said to him that her actions to date had been in accordance to what was written in that book. Having saved Subaru, smiling with him in the mansion, stubbornly continuing to say this was her own place, everything was as recorded in the book. However,
If everything was according to the book, your own will had nothing to do with it. That's what you're saying, right?
So many questions. If you know about this book, no explanation should be necessary.
I told you I'm filling in the gaps with guesswork. You and Roswell hide way too much stuff. That's why it's been such a pain in the rear to bring you out of here.
Bring me out.
That's right, I've come to bring you out of this archive of forbidden books. We can call it a temporary evacuation, but if I'm being honest, I don't want to bring you back here. This place, it's unhealthy.
Gasped. What do you think you are saying, I wonder? Bring me out of here. What's self-serving?
Your face says this wasn't what you had in mind. Isn't everything I do written in that book of yours?
Pointing at the book, Subaru posed the question to the unnerved Beatrice. His assertion sent the girl's face flying into shock, her fingers trembling as she opened the book and flipped through its pages. As if clinging to the book, as if trying to reel the future in, her big eyes were filled with gloom as she flipped the pages.
Why?
The girl's attitude toward the conduct Subaru himself had pointed out rubbed him in a very bad way. Perhaps it was irrational of him, and yet a smudge of anger welled up within his chest. In the blink of an eye, the instantaneous relief he felt when he got his wish for a reunion with Beatrice was blotted out.
Why are you clinging to that book? That's not something you need to do.
Subaru suppressed his anger at the feeble gesture and murmured. During that time, Beatrice was desperately flipping the pages, her eyes running through the book in search of salvation. She looked so very frail. She was always full of confidence, sitting haughtily upon her stool, greeting Subaru as if he was nothing but trouble, grudgingly lending him her aid. Was that not the librarian of the archive of forbidden books, Beatrice, who Subaru Natsuki believed in?
You're right here in front of my eyes. When I'm talking to you, look at my eyes. Not the book, damn it!
Stomping his feet, Subaru stood in front of Beatrice. When his shadow was cast over the open book, Beatrice looked up, realizing for the first time that Subaru was standing right next to her. Subaru felt anger at the sight of himself reflected in her pupils. He had the face of a child abandoned by his parents. It was both Subaru and the actions of the girl bound by the book that had left him with that expression. If that pensive face, that sullen face, that frail, fleeting face, if any and all of those things had been recorded in the book, then where was the girl Subaru had been meeting until now? What face did the girl named Beatrice truly make?
Give me that.
It is.
Extending his arm, he seized the magic tome Beatrice was clutching by force. Instantly, she attempted to resist, but her trembling fingers had no strength in them, and Subaru easily tore the book away from her. It was lighter than he had expected. That fact, too, irritated him. A single tome, this light had cast such a dark shadow over Beatrice's entire way of life. Just how much power did the notations within possess? And how much of Beatrice's actions, words, emotions, were all done according to the book? Grasping the book he had torn away, he violently flipped the pages with his fingers. His eyes ran across the contents to read what was written therein. In so doing, he meant to discover Beatrice's true thoughts. And yet, Subaru gazed in blank astonishment as his eyes leaped across the book's interior. There was nothing written on the page he had opened. He flipped the page. There was nothing on the backside either. He flipped the page. Flip, flip, flip as he might. There was not a single sentence or even a single character on so much as a single page. It was blank pages with nothing written on them, over and over.
It has been like that for a long time now. It has been like that for a long time.
Addressing the bewildered Subaru, whose eyes were bulging in surprise, Beatrice murmured almost as if uttering a soliloquy. With the book stolen from her two hands, the girl used them to cover her face instead, so that Subaru would not see the expression now resting upon it. With nothing more than a broken voice, she put her withered emotions to her tongue and continued.
It has been many years since that book has shown Betty's future.
Pulling her knees close, Beatrice curled up and shrank atop of the stool. Realizing that was a posture that would not yield to interference, Subaru endured his impatience and waited for her next words. From this halting silence, Beatrice began her confession with a lecture on her duties as a librarian. It was a lecture about the true nature of the archive of forbidden books and unraveled the history behind it.
Bev, the role granted to Betty is to maintain and preserve this archive of knowledge, to continue and protect this place until the time we shall someday be reunited, I suppose.
Archive of knowledge.
Standing up, Subaru surveyed the array of bookshelves that entombed the room. His legs had brought him to this place many times over, and a great many times his eyes had perused a number of the books found within. It was from this that Subaru knew that the archive contained a huge variety of books, including texts that even he could understand, and most likely various types containing forbidden knowledge as well. This collection was impossibly vast, lacking rhyme or reason, almost as if books of any and every type had been stuffed into the place.
It was established by someone who loved storing knowledge above all else.
The murmur was full of fondness, of cherishing, of yearning. It was those words trickling out of Beatrice that made the image of someone Subaru knew float up into his mind.
I had a vague suspicion ever since I found out that Rosewall was connected to that witch.
The first clue was the administration of the sanctuary, passed down through the Rosewall family generation after generation. Rosewall had said this was a role entrusted to them by the witch. Based on his extraordinary obsession with the witch and his behavior to date, Subaru had somehow managed to guess. There was a spirit in that very Rosewall's mansion, one who had come to dwell there long ago. There was no pact between Rosewall and this spirit. This, too, was something Rosewall had openly declared. Who, then, had been at that mansion and made a contract with the spirit to protect the archive of forbidden books?
Beatrice, you're Echidna's contracted spirit.
The breath that trickled out of her was reply enough. That small thing was sufficient to know what rested within her heart. Beatrice was a spirit contracted to Echidna the witch. It was Beatrice's duty to serve as guardian of the essence of knowledge of the witch who styled herself as greed for knowledge incarnate, craving to know all there was to know in the world. Perhaps she had granted the girl her book of knowledge as a reward or as a tool necessary for her duties. Even if that was so, it had already ceased to function.
You said earlier that the book's been blank for years now?
It is the truth.
It's not like I'm doubting you. Actually, I really am doubting you. I mean, come on. If not, you, without anything being even written in that book.
For that meant she had granted me her aid several times over, of her own free will. The confirmation that I could not put into words was the greatest hope I had discovered in that entire loop. Previously, I had begun that loop with the knowledge that Beatrice possessed that magic tome. When she told me that all her actions to date were simply what was recorded in that book, it had been a heavy blow to me. I had known Beatrice for scarcely 2 months, but during those 2 months, I had talked with her many times. They had been involved in many events, and sometimes they had laughed together. When I was told that had all been a sham, it had been a time of agony and disbelief. But I had checked the magic tome of blank pages because I'd suspected it would confirm my suspicions. By healing the gut wound I had received in the royal capital, by letting me be close to her when the tragedy at the mansion drove nails into my heart, by cooperating with the investigation into the cause of my curse, Beatrice had saved me many times over. I believe that all that was unrelated to what was written in the book, and so too, the days of fun we had spent thereafter,
Without any relation to the book, you...
Did I not tell you last time? Did I not tell you last time? I wonder.
As Subaru's voice broached the subject of gentler things, seemingly clinging to hope, Beatrice interrupted. Her voice did not tremble. In front of Subaru, his breath catching as she interrupted him, Beatrice slowly lowered the hands covering her face, and what emerged was emotionless, like a no mask. Her face, unfeeling like something completely artificial, made Subaru shudder, gripped by a strange sensation. For some reason, the impression she gave off at that moment was like the Ryuzu replicas, the same as that of a copy. As Subaru's lips twisted in horror, Beatrice remained expressionless as she continued.
Someday, that person will come to the archive. Betty was told her duty is to wait until then.
For that person you said.
The term that suddenly leaped into his eardrums made Subaru open his eyes wide in astonishment. That person, the words Subaru had heard several times over during that loop. Roswell had told him to say those words to Beatrice as if it was a deeply suggestive term. Having missed his opportunities to say it himself to Beatrice, some twist of fate had made him hear those words from Beatrice herself, leaving Subaru bewildered. Beatrice, interpreting his confusion as a sign that he simply didn't know what she meant, explained further.
It is as I said. Betty is to continue to protect the archive of forbidden books until that person appears. It is Betty's duty to protect the stored knowledge so it may be handed to that person, I suppose.
The complicated emotions with which Betty spoke of that person stabbed him in the chest. The tone of her voice was complex, at once full of loveliness, hatred, impatience, resentment, and exhaustion. Those reverberations made Subaru stuff his heart full of hateful words toward Roswell, who had so lightly told Subaru to bring up that person to her. And more than that, he could not fail to sense an ominous disquiet in Beatrice's demeanor.
Someday, someone will fulfill the promise of the archive of forbidden books. Betty has always awaited the day that person would arrive as written in the book.
Wait, Beatrice, calm down a little. You and I are both too worked up. Let's calm down a bit and...
But that person never came, nor will the book say who that person is. And so, time has passed, and so too much time has passed, and that is why...
He couldn't let her say any more. Even though he was certain of this, the words refused to come out. What should he say that she might not speak the words? If he said the wrong thing, there would be no stopping her. He didn't know what the correct answer was. Hence, all that trickled out was a broken breath.
And I do not care if you are not that person. I shall bear it if it must be you. Are you the one who shall end Betty? Who shall bring an end to the pact? Who shall take this life? I wonder...
This was Beatrice's desire. Her earnest wish was for a way to end the end of the end. Subaru could not pull his look away from those eyes brimming with sorrow. Beatrice's greatest wish slid into his eardrums, but its contents would not sink into his head. No, it was not that they couldn't enter. His brain was merely rejecting them, doing everything it could to prevent him from understanding. But even so, he did comprehend. It was conveyed to him. The eyes, the voice, the thoughts of the girl before him were screaming it at him. Her desire to end the end of the far side of a very long pact.
You're saying, because of that you want to die?
Strictly speaking, it is different from wanting to die. Betty desires the end of the pact. Perhaps desires freedom from the pact, to which she has been eternally bound.
If the only way to do that is taking your life, how is that different from wanting to die?
Subaru wrung his voice out at the girl who refused to understand. He was shouting in anger. He slammed the magic tome in his grasp onto the floor. Just like that, the blow unraveled the old tome. Its blank pages fluttered and danced within the archive. Blank pages scattered, flitting back and forth in the space between Subaru and Beatrice. Sweeping them away, with an arm, he howled.
You want to die? Cut the crap! Saying you want to die, even if others would let you say it, that's the one thing I won't let anyone say in front of me.
If you died, your life could not be brought back. That was an iron rule. That alone was absolutely inviolable. Only Subaru Natsuki was different. That was why there was value in him and him alone casting away his life. Even if he died, it had meaning, something he had been able to demonstrate with tangible proof. Beatrice was different. Everyone else was different. This was something he absolutely could not allow.
That is a very self-serving thing of you to say. What do you understand about Betty? I wonder...
However, her reply to his irritation was so very cold, as sharp as any blade. Spreading her skirt, Beatrice set her feet onto the stool and hopped onto the floor. Then she gestured toward the archive with a hand.
Betty has spent many years here, obeying the pact. 400 years.
400 years.
That phrase again, thought Subaru, grimacing. He felt tempted to click his tongue. Many of that world's important historical events were clumped up together 400 years prior. That had been the era of the witch, the end of destruction and the beginning of prosperity, the patronage of the kingdom, the contempt for half-demons. It was an abominable era that was responsible for the fates of so many. Beatrice, too, was born in that era and had lived since then until the present day.
Being the pact, I lived under the same roof as the Mathers family, who stood in the same position as I, spending my days in accordance to what was written in the magic tome. I would hardly consider those first several decades to be suffering at all, I suppose.
Subaru felt a chill as he listened to her voice and the grandness of the details she spoke of. Zero, Starting Life in Another World by Tappy Nagatsuki, casted Six-Tail Novel. Please subscribe to our channel.
But even during that time, the world shifted. The first Roswell that Betty knew passed away, and the next generation inherited the duty. Betty has been watching this act of replacement the whole time.
The girl explained calmly. This reflected the blandness of the passage of time, the frayed nature of the reality she had experienced.
I waited day after day for that person who was supposed to come someday, but was I at all anxious? I wonder, after all, Betty had the book. As long as she trusted and waited, as long as there were amended pages, then surely, one day.
But that's...
The remains of the magic tome were scattered all over the floor. Subaru knew that from Beatrice's perspective, what was written on those blank pages was very cruel indeed. To Beatrice, that whiteness denoted despair. At some point, the Book of Knowledge, which to her was a symbol of hope,
No matter how many times I checked each and every day, there was no change in the text. The span of time until I became certain was incredibly trying.
a heavy silence filled the room.
You have seen the revision to the final page in my dreams over and over. Perhaps I continued to yearn for that person who I did not know, face unknown to me, opening the door so that I might receive the blessing of a duty fulfilled.
Beatrice.
Each time someone's hand reached for that door, Betty's heart was betrayed.
In other words, whenever someone had opened the door, entering the archive of forbidden books, yet was not that person, Subaru was probably included as one of those who disappointed her with every visit. Beatrice's despair only ever continued to pile higher countless times. Subaru had only added to the wounds she carried within her. Wounds he had unreservedly, rudely, thoughtlessly gouged into her, over and over, never healed and were still oozing blood.
As I spent my time like that, I realized, no, perhaps I knew it all along.
Realized what?
Knowing of her suffering, knowing that he had added to her wounds, his voice trembled, and as his own sins tore at his chest, Beatrice softly smiled. It was a forlorn, frail smile, just like when she had stated she wanted someone to end it all.
But when no more is written in the book, it means that the owner's future has come to an end.
You're wrong.
The fitful denial that flew out never reached Beatrice. It simply bounced right off her immovable, resigned heart. A baseless emotional argument was not what she sought. She wasn't looking for someone to console her either. The answer to her question had already come out from inside her. Out it came, into the open.
Why do you have to?
Even so, Subaru's emotions would not permit it. He refuted Beatrice's surrender, her desire for death.
So you came to a conclusion all by yourself. This is what happens to everyone when they're worried and mull things over all by their lonesome. That's when things go in bad directions just like this. You start thinking, this is the only way, and you agonize over that thought. That's when you think the only road in front of you is the worst one possible. Because he was Subaru, someone who'd railed against his own powerlessness as he threw himself against hardship over and over, he understood. A senseless destiny pushed people into isolation. And with the compulsion to continue to stand and face it alone, black fingers would entwine around any heart fighting that lonely battle. But that was a rule that didn't need to be followed. He wanted to convey that to her. If only he could return to Beatrice the power of the similar words she had once spoken to him, Subaru could... If what you want is someone to do something to help, say it so people can understand. One sentence is enough. Say that you're sad. Say that you want help. If you can say that, even I.
If she did that, surely she would notice. There was no need to give up at all.
A whole bunch of times, you. That's why this time I'll...
Do something to help.
That's it. Call out for help. Just like that.
Ew. Do something to help.
That's it. That's it. That's it. That's it. If you say that and reach out with your hand...
Betty, wants to be saved from this. Sadness? This. Suffering? This darkness?
Yeah, leave it to me. I'll.
Her tiny, shaking fingers reached out toward Subaru. He reached a hand out toward hers. His blood was rushing to his head. That moment, all he wanted to do was to embrace the girl before his eyes, to shower her with kindness. That moment, Subaru had completely forgotten the reason he came for a visit to begin with, but that was for the best. Thanks to that, he had discovered this girl tormented by loneliness. Then and there, Subaru was being driven solely by the burning sense of duty residing in his chest. If he took her hand, Subaru would be accepting another weighty burden. He didn't care. Beatrice was someone he could not abandon to begin with. All he had done was confirm that in his heart, his soul was shouting as loud as it could, and Subaru simply obeyed its call. Save her. Rescue her. After all, that girl is to you.
Is that why?
The finger she had stretched out indeed reached Subaru's own. He grabbed hold of her frail, trembling fingers, strongly joining their hands so that neither could let go. He looked into Beatrice's eyes, unsure if he should smile or send a nod her way instead. Her blue eyes were filled with a great many tears.
Betty wants you to kill her. I wonder.
She flung Subaru's hand aside. The salvation she sought was nothing so cheap. His hand cast aside, his fingers grasping nothing at all. The rejection made his heart go numb. He could not raise his voice to ask, why? Beatrice's eyes would not let him. It was too late for that. Those eyes were filled with too much despair, with too much that could not be undone.
And never spent 400 years always here alone.
Beatrice.
It is a most shame protecting this place always alone, while that person whose certain arrival never came, I suppose.
He could not look away from Beatrice's two eyes. He called out her name. But the current Subaru hesitated to do even that.
Yash. I do not know how many times I thought of throwing it all away. I do not know how many times I wished I could forget everything. 100 times, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000,000. And still it was not enough.
In that dimly lit room, Beatrice had spent a very, very long time steeped in loneliness. Holding her knees, sitting on top of that stool, she had continued to cling to hope and despair for someone whose name she knew not. Just how many times had loneliness killed this girl's heart?
You want to save me. You want to do something to help me. You want to do something to help me. Oh, just how many times do you think Betty has asked exactly that? Did you think Betty simply gave up? Not once thinking of such a thing, I wonder.
The words were halting, but they were imbued with steadily increasing heat. Her eyes held an intensity light. Anger, disappointment, sadness, dejection. Subaru didn't see any of that. It was simply the glimmer of her tears.
Are you saying that if I reached out with a hand, you would pull Betty out of this darkness that has no end in sight? That has no end in sight. Are you saying that you would teach me the correct answer for this never-ending blind alley, I wonder?
A tense silence fell as Subaru struggled for words.
If you were going to do that, then why, then why? Then why? Then why? Then why?
As Beatrice lowered her face, she breathed in, leaving a brief pause in time. This was the final opportunity, the only moment left where he could get a word in. It was that or nothing, and yet Subaru hesitated out of fear. Afraid of hurting her, he said nothing. Beatrice lifted her face.
She was glaring at him. She opened her mouth, baring her teeth.
Why did you leave Betty alone for 400 years? Why did you leave Betty alone for 400 years? I was alone. Always, 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 always. Betty was here alone. I was lonely. I was scared. I felt abandoned. I felt like I could not fulfill the single duty assigned to me. Uphold the promise I made. I thought I was going to be alone here forever.
Tears spilled out, coursing down from Beatrice's large eyes. Passing over her cheeks, a deluge of sorrow fell from her chin onto the floor. As her searing tears struck the floor, Subaru's heart was struck by an incredible blow, cracking and smashing it to pieces.
You came to save me? You came to rescue me? You came to rescue me? Why didn't you come sooner? Why didn't you embrace me from the beginning? Why? Why did you leave Betty by herself?
Her words became a blade, became fire, became steel, wounding Subaru's heart one after the next. In various forms and various meanings, she tormented Subaru with every suffering she had endured. And Beatrice was only showering him with the tip of the iceberg of 400 years' worth of pain. Just how much did the words of someone like Subaru Natsuki ring true compared to Beatrice's 4 centuries of isolation?
Words like save me, do something to help me. Over 4 centuries have I not exhausted such pleas long ago. I wonder.
Subaru stood speechless, crushed by the weight of her history.
It is not as if no one came during those 400 years. Among them were humans who attempted to bring Betty out. They sought Betty's power as a high-ranking spirit.
Don't lump me in with people like that. All I want is to.
It has nothing to do with Betty's power. You merely wish to save the person before your eyes. Did I claim there were no naive sorts like you among them? I wonder. But they did not bring Betty out. Of course not.
After all, Beatrice continued her words, making a very forlorn smile as she said,
You cast half-hearted resolve cannot erase the pact that binds Betty. It is impossible for mere humans.
What should I?
Make Betty number 1. Fuzz.
The words tossed his way were so very quiet and yet so very sharp. Subaru felt like fine needles had been thrust through his eardrums, sending a blow shooting right through him.
Make Betty your number 1. Think of Betty first. Choose Betty first. Overwrite the pact. Blot out the pact. Bring me out of here. Draw me to you. Embrace me.
Subaru remained silent, his heart in turmoil.
That is absolutely impossible for you, I suppose.
Beatrice's sincere, earnest plea was enough to clamp down on his heart. The request was unspeakably heavy, one that did not permit a thoughtless nod.
Your number 1 has been long decided. Therefore, you cannot save Betty.
Emilia was inside him. Rem was inside him. Both were inside him. Betty's words were clear. When he thought of both of them, Subaru's heart leaped and grew hot. This was the answer carved upon his soul. Beatrice's words were the truth. It was probably beyond Subaru to make Betty his number 1 priority.
That is why I wish you to destroy Betty, the worthless girl who desires to destroy her pact, to turn her back on her duty as a spirit who has accomplished nothing and no one for 400 years.
That's how important the pact is to you. If you don't like it, if you want to stop, why don't you just stop then? If it's not something you do out of your own will whatsoever, then
Is it not the one thing that gives Betty's life meaning? I wonder.
Subaru couldn't find an answer for that. Instead, Subaru posed a different question, and in so doing, he committed a base sin. Instantly, despair filled Beatrice's eyes as she stated her words in a thin voice.
Betty is a spirit who lives for the sake of this pact. It was the first role I was granted in this life. Selfishly cast this aside and live. That is what you are telling me to do?
it's not selfish at all, damn it. You've already hung in there for 4 centuries. Who'd blame you after you protected a single promise for all that time? Who could? You've done enough.
No one would blame? That is not so. Betty would. Betty absolutely cannot permit it. Beatrice the spirit cannot permit such a haphazard way of life.
Stepping forward with a trembling foot, Subaru attempted to grasp the little girl's shoulder, but Beatrice angrily rebuffed his attempt, thrusting his touch aside and putting distance between them. He stepped back and coughed. He felt weak. What meaning was there in having a voice if it could not reach her? She was glaring at him. Her eyes were filled with tears. Biting her lip, she grasped the hem of her skirt. She's far too small, he thought. How could everyone have abandoned this little girl for all that time?
You are not that person spoken of in the pact, I suppose.
Subaru could only watch, his heart aching.
But would you become that person? Would you make Betty your number one?
Subaru had no words. This was not something he could easily agree to, nor could he impulsively refute her words. He could not heal Beatrice's loneliness. 4 centuries were too much for his mind to even grasp. Unless he spent an equal amount of time alone, there was no way to truly learn what was in her heart.
Betty knows best of all that there's nothing you can do.
Beatrice,
Therefore, kill Betty by your own hand. Suicide is the same as violating the pact. Is it something a spirit absolutely cannot do, I suppose? I cannot even choose to die by myself.
why me?
Beatrice stretched both arms toward him in an earnest plea. Unable to look directly at the hand she haltingly stretched forth, Subaru covered his face with both of his own.
Why are you entrusting me with your 4 centuries final end?
Why? I wonder.
They were tearful words. They were words making excuses, evasive words merely spoken to block things he disliked out of his ears. Beatrice did not scorn Subaru for his cowardice. She simply sighed. Then, after a momentary pause, she slowly nodded and said,
I understand now. Betty is probably entrusting you with her final moment because...
Once he heard the answer, there was no going back. He was certain of it, and yet his decision came too late. He had realized too late. It was too late for everything.
Sorry to intrude mid-conversation, but
A voice he should not have heard spoke. Hastened by a terrible chill, Subaru flipped around. Then he saw her.
is it all right if I become that person for you, I wonder?
Carrying a black, curved blade in her hand, a kukri knife, the black-clothed Bowel Hunter stood at the archive's entrance. To Subaru, the voice of the woman he heard behind him was the backing track to his very first death. Since being summoned to that other world, Subaru had experienced a great many perils, sometimes losing his life to them, but that black-clothed woman's existence remained a symbol of death to him nonetheless. Wearing a black mantle clad in an outfit unsparingly exposing her curvaceous physique, her black hair, as rare in that world as Subaru's own, tied in a triple knot, the woman had a lustrous, sensuous beauty to her that far exceeded the norm. There stood Elsa Gramhilde, a.k.a. the Bow Hunter.
Oh my, so you were here too. So tell me, how did your body fare after that? Did the insides of your belly get all prettied up again?
Noticing Subaru frozen from shock, Elsa slightly opened her eyes wider and tilted her head, almost like greeting an old friend. She posed that question, but from the beginning, she had not come in order to hold a conversation. Speaking and acting in ways no normal person could understand, the person before his eyes, speaking things like that as if they made perfect sense, was a dyed-in-the-wool mad woman.
Whose permission did you obtain to step into this archive, I wonder?
As Subaru stood rooted to the spot, a voice abruptly slipped past his flank, aiming the question directly at Elsa. It was Beatrice, with cold hostility trained upon the insolent intruder. Her posture remained the same as when she had confronted Subaru earlier, but she was glaring at the trespasser without the slightest hint of tears on her face.
It wasn't locked, so all I did was open the door and come in. If you want to have an important conversation, I think you really should remember to lock the door first.
Such a frivolous reply. This is Betty's archive of forbidden books. None may enter without permission. None may enter without permission.
That is what you mean. It is quite simple, really.
When Beatrice questioned her further, Elsa nodded as if finally understanding the meaning of the question. Then she indicated the still open door with her hand as she explained.
Your magic to isolate a space, it uses doors as catalysts, yes? Now lost dark magic that links doors to other doors, was it?
Eve, that is correct, I suppose, but just because you know that.
Oh my, once you understand that, it's quite simple. When facing magic that affects closed doors, as long as I go ahead and open every last door, I eliminate all your options, don't I?
Brrr. Net. Woo. Yeah!
Elsa indicated a very simple method indeed for breaking Beatrice's passage spell. Those words made Beatrice's eyes go wide, unshakable proof that this was the correct answer. Simultaneously, Subaru realized that this was the reason for the inexplicable sight he saw earlier in the loop when he discovered all the doors in the mansion flung open. That was not a ransacking of violent means of searching every nook and cranny for people within the mansion, but the vestiges of a search completely and solely devoted to finding Beatrice.
I told you, yes, it's a very simple matter. It did take a little time, so I'm rather relieved to have finally found you. I'm truly glad to have reached you before Meili returns from the village.
Village! You said village just now.